Chapter 217. It was getting closer and closer to the new year. However, it seemed that this year was not destined to be too peaceful. Under the continuous disasters, the entire southern region did not feel any festive news. An adult red dragon appeared near Whiterun. Although Soren had long known that there was a dragon there, and it was an ancient red dragon, it was not until now that others had discovered its existence. This dragon caused a lot of chaos and attracted a lot of adventurers who tried to slay the dragon. At the same time, it threatened the surrounding cities and forced them to strengthen their defenses. The red dragon was an evil existence. The bureaucrats and nobles began to increase taxes on the existence of the dragon, using the excuse of guarding against the attack of the red dragon to collect money. They could always find all kinds of excuses to collect extra taxes. There seemed to be a migration of orcs near the mountains in the south. Because of the antagonism between races, the conflict in this area became more intense. It seemed that a war could break out at any time. There was little information about the desert area. However, it seemed that the trade route to the east was cut off by someone. It seemed that the chaos in the desert area was also spreading. No new cities were destroyed, but more turmoil was still fermenting. There seemed to be traces of devil worshippers north of the City of Wealth. The devils had just been cleaned up, and the bewitching devils seemed to have begun to appear. The appearance of the evil god followers was becoming more and more frequent. Almost every city had some unfamiliar faces. The elven court seemed to have also undergone a division. The ancient tree doctrine of the Druids and the gods' doctrine of the ancient tree doctrine had a fierce dispute. It was rumored that some of the high-grade droll who believed in the Tree of Life had left. Even the legendary Earthwalker felt a little dissatisfied with the elven court. The tree shepherds stood on the side of the droll. As the balance and protectors of nature, their beliefs were more inclined to the Tree of Life than the elven gods. Droll had always been the middle power of the elves. Although the elves were also very talented among other spellcasters, no spellcaster profession had more than droll. This matter was still brewing, and the conflict was still escalating. If there was no powerful force to intervene, it was very likely that it would lead to an internal division among the elves. Droll would split from the elves, give up the belief of the elven gods, and turn to the oldest Tree of Life. This doctrine was supported by a large number of droll from the outside world. At the same time, it was also widely spread among the other races. They called it the revival of droll. Among the humans, half-elves, orcs, half-orcs, and other races, all the nomadic droll who were inspired by nature seemed to be very supportive of restoring the oldest belief in the Tree of Life. This caused the droll order in the entire world to shift. More than 60% of the droll had transferred their faith to the Tree of Life. The elven pantheon's influence in the droll was greatly reduced, and the various droll churches seemed to be plotting something. The power of the elven gods had declined. Before the time of troubles began, their strength had already declined. This seemed to be something that a certain existence was very happy to see. She had been waiting for this opportunity for thousands of years. The Queen of Spiders was weaving a spider web, waiting for the first prey to appear. Inside a dark canyon, a tall and handsome figure was moving forward. He was wearing a noble's robe and playing with a flute in his hand. In this very gloomy and terrifying canyon, he moved forward leisurely as if he was taking a stroll in a courtyard. A strange sound came, which seemed to be sharp and harsh. He listened carefully, then raised his hand and summoned a light. A dense shadow appeared in front of him. It was a palm-sized vampire bat. There were so many of them that they almost filled the dark canyon. Whoosh! A gust of wind came, and the overwhelming number of vampire bats flew up. They had sharp fangs and dark red wings. There were probably hundreds of thousands of them. After flying up, they almost covered the sky in the canyon. With so many vampire bats, even a legendary profession would be dangerous, but the person in front of him was not worried at all. He gently picked up the flute and blew it. The notes seemed to come from hell. A black mass of vampire bats fell to the ground. Traces of blood flowed out of their eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. Clap, clap, clap. There was a burst of applause, and the demigod vampire in an exquisite suit appeared. He looked at the man in front of him and smiled. "You are indeed the legendary Helpeimer. You dare to come here alone to find me." Helpeimer. A name that was taboo in many places. The man's face did not seem to be the one in front of him. He glanced at Reinhardt indifferently and said slowly, "The god of vampires? Could it be that you only have these little tricks after becoming a god? It seems that your life is not very good. I seem to have heard that you were chased by a group of people like a stray dog." Reinhardt's mouth twitched, but he still had an elegant smile on his face. He said slowly, "This is only temporary. After becoming a god, I have seen a wider world. An unprecedented opportunity is coming. As long as I seize this opportunity, I can stand on the top of the gods. At that time, no one can stop me from ascending to the throne." The Helpeimer smiled with a playful expression and said, "Is that so? Then you'll have to escape from me first." Reinhardt frowned and looked at him. He said slowly, "Do you really want to fight? Why do you want to stand on their side? What they can give you, I can give you the same thing. I am even willing to share everything with you." The Helpeimer showed a sarcastic smile and said softly, "What you have seen is just the tip of the iceberg. Even if you want to cooperate with me, you have to show your value. There are countless weak gods like you in the Pantheon Temple." The figure of the Helpeimer disappeared strangely. It was like an invisible sound wave spread, and the nearby vampire bats fell to the ground and died. Snake Island. Soren stood on the dock overlooking everything. In just 3 days, he had recruited hundreds of pirates. Now his men had reached more than 300. Adele's valiant figure stood at the bow of the ship. Next to her was the first mate promoted by Soren. Now that they had enough strength, it was time to clean up the other enemies. Pirates did not need to be trained, nor did they need to be nurtured. This was a survival of the fittest profession. The strong would survive, and the weak would be eliminated. "Let's go." Soren gently landed on the head of the killer whale. Facing the awe-inspiring eyes of the other pirates, there was only a hint of anxiety in his eyes. Because he heard a piece of bad news. It seemed that the influence of the throat cutter was greater than he expected. It even alarmed one of the pirate kings who ruled near the south coast. The pirate king, the Swamp King. It was not a human, but a hybrid between a swamp giant and a lizard man. The intelligence of the giant race had always been low, but this pirate king was an exception. The probability of cross-race breeding was very low. It was said that its birth was due to some forbidden spells. The lizard men were amphibious creatures. They could move on land as well as in water. The Swamp King was one of the pirate kings who ruled near the south coast. Its pirates included humans, lizard men, murlocs, hybrids, and so on. If it weren't for the exclusion of racial lineage, its control of the south coast would be more firm. The 3 pirate kings each had their own allegiances. Among them, the Amazon pirate king was backed by the Storm Church. She was a pirate king who believed in the Storm Lord. Another pirate king with half Amazon blood was a non-human creature. He had the support of the Naga Sea tribe and believed in the sea goddess. The last pirate king was the Swamp King. He did not believe in any of the gods above, but gave his faith to the demon god in the abyss. That was the king of the deep sea, the ancient demon, Dagon. There was a religious text that said, in the mortal world, Dagon's cult prevailed in the coastal areas. Its human believers or swamp giants, tidal giants and so on, mated with half-fish creatures. At the cost of tarnishing their bloodline, they gained great power, rich fishing, and strange treasures from the demon lord. Yes. The Swamp King was a monster born for certain reasons. At the cost of tarnishing his own bloodline, he gained power from the Abyss Lord, Dagon. However, an accident occurred during the ritual. The person in charge of the ritual did not please the evil Lord of the Abyss, and it did not gain much power. On the contrary, an unexpected offspring born during the blasphemy ritual, which was the current Lord of the Swamp, received power from the Lord of the Abyss, Dagon. So, a monster with a mix of lizard man and swamp giant blood was born. Not only did it have great power, but it also had the wisdom of a demon. Although this wisdom seemed a little crazy, it still became one of the 3 pirate kings on the south coast. This pirate king controlled the south coast near the deep sea. Its lair was said to be in a place called Demon Island, and only the most vicious pirates would seek refuge there. It was also the only pirate king that did not play by the rules. Although the pirate kings had great power and influence, they were still inextricably linked to the church. Almost all of them acted for their own interests and situations. Only this Swamp King liked to mess around. If it was not satisfied with the rise of a powerful pirate on the south coast and attacked Soren, then Soren really did not have much confidence in defeating it. He needed the power of Vivian. Although Soren could ask for help from the Sea Temple, it also meant that he had to pay a price. Not to mention that the news was told to him by the Naga Siren priest. Soren still remembered the meaningful expression on the priest's face when she said this information. Chapter 2:18. Soren didn't know if it was an illusion or not. He always felt that the Naga Siren priest was cheating him. The Swamp King suddenly became interested in his newly risen pirate force. It was impossible that no one was behind this. Moreover, the rumors of the throat cutter spread so quickly. Not only did it increase his reputation, but it also expanded the influence of the Sea Temple that the throat cutter served. Because the throat cutter worked for the Sea Temple, the more widely the throat cutter spread, the more others feared the Sea Temple. In the legendary naval battle, the Naga Siren priest defeated the son of Dagon, and the throat cutter was labeled as the Sea Temple. As a follower of Dagon, it was not surprising that the Swamp King attacked him. Sure enough, the original inhabitants of this world are not simple. Soren looked at the sea in the distance, but his heart was not calm. Whether he won or lost, the Sea Temple would be the winner in the end. First of all, if the Swamp King attacked him, it would force Soren into a very dangerous position. If he couldn't deal with the Swamp King, then he had to ask for help from the Sea Temple. The Naga Siren priest was waiting for this opportunity. If Soren wanted to ask for help, he would naturally have to pay a price. Maybe he would be forced to join the Sea Temple. This was tantamount to an extra force for no reason. To be able to let a quasi-legendary profession serve the Sea Temple, the strength of the Naga Siren priest had undoubtedly improved a lot. Taking a step back. Even if Soren defeated the Swamp King, it didn't matter. The reputation of the throat cutter would further spread, and the influence of the Sea Temple would increase again. As the patron of the sea goddess, the stronger Soren was, the greater the influence of the sea goddess. No matter from which point of view, the Naga Siren priest would not lose. That was why she did not interfere with Soren's idea of establishing a pirate force. She was even willing to lend a warship. If Soren won, her status would also be improved. If Soren couldn't beat her, she would be able to get a strong helper. It was the best result. Naturally, it was Soren who asked for help from the Sea Temple, then joined the forces of the Sea Temple, and finally defeated the Swamp King. In this way, she controlled 2/3 of the power of the south coast. The Amazon Pirate Queen's area of activity was the Soros Islands. If Soren defeated the Swamp King, almost the entire south coast would be under the control of the Sea Temple. In this world, legends were relatively scattered. Those in high positions were not willing to risk their lives. It was naturally best to have a sword for their own use. If not for Vivian's help. Soren only had 2 choices. One was to join the Sea Temple in exchange for help, and then find a way to defeat the Swamp King and control 1/3 of the sea on the south coast. The other option was to give up on these pirate forces and directly form a fleet to go to the outer islands. However, if he did that, he would lose the connection to the mainland. He would only have as much capital as he could take with him. The progress of his future development would be greatly reduced, and it would be difficult to establish a connection with the mainland in a short period of time. The outer islands. That was a real barren land. Fierce beasts ran rampant, monsters wreaked havoc, and there were unreasonable indigenous people. There was a lack of food, medicine, weapons, and even the basic necessities. If he couldn't supply through the sea, Soren was almost starting from scratch. The time of troubles was getting closer and closer. It was difficult for him to reach his goal in just 2 years. If Soren wanted to rise in the sea, he absolutely couldn't do without a link to the mainland. Now I can only destroy the sea wolf first. Soren looked at the sea in front of him and said to himself, if I destroy the sea wolf, I will almost become one of the top pirate forces on the south coast. The number of slayers should also be about the same. If Vivian can successfully wake up, with the strength of the two of us together, it's not impossible to defeat the Swamp King. I don't know if the Sea Temple has made the right move. Soren didn't have so many choices. In the current situation, he could only kill his own way out. Even if the Swamp King wanted to deal with him, it wouldn't be so fast for the time being. Soren still had a little time to prepare. A day passed quickly. Soren led the fleet and quickly entered the sea area of Shipwreck Bay. The Seawolf was one of the few pirates here. He had his own territory in Shipwreck Bay, and at the same time, he also divided an island. Since this place was called the Outer Islands, naturally there were many islands scattered in the coastal area. Pirates from all over the world were scattered in these places to sell their stolen goods. Many of them were official chambers of commerce. For example, the Seawolf secretly controlled a chamber of commerce. He sold the goods he robbed through the black market. The Seawolf's territory was called Lone Wolf Island. Soren didn't care about the original name, it was the Seawolf who changed the name later. This time, Soren didn't bother to make any plans. What he wanted was to crush the Seawolf fair and square to prove his ability to fight head-on naval battles, and at the same time, deter the entire pirate group on the south coast. The destruction of Narwhal was too sudden. Some people speculated that Soren had used some kind of conspiracy. This time, Soren planned to attack. As long as he took down this sea area, no one would dare to go against him. Shipwreck Bay, Lone Wolf Island. Pirate ships gathered here, the number actually reached dozens, but there were only 9 real warships. The rest were coastal ships that couldn't sail far. A large number of pirates gathered near the port. In addition to the Seawolf's men, there were other pirate groups near Shipwreck Bay. They received an invitation from the Seawolf a day ago to join forces to deal with the rumored throat cutter. The rise of a pirate force would inevitably affect the interests of others, so many people responded to the Seawolf's invitation. At the top of the hall, the Seawolf sat on a chair and looked at the other pirate leaders in front of him. He was a man with a thin face. His eyes looked like a wolf's. There seemed to be a green light in the darkness. He looked around and said, I don't intend to say much about this matter. You should have heard of this throat cutter. He has the support of the Sea Temple. If he continues to grow, there will be no room for us to move in the nearby sea area. Let's join forces. As long as we kill him, I'm willing to give Narwhal's territory to you. There was a lot of discussion below. One of the big men who looked like a northerner glanced at the Seawolf and said in a deep voice, it seems that the person supported by the throat cutter is the daughter of the killer whale, right? The killer whale died in your hands. Maybe he just wants to deal with you. That's a legendary figure. We may not be able to defeat him. You only want to divide Narwhal's territory? There are so many people here. How is it enough? The Seawolf's pupils shrank when he heard the words. His eyes were slightly cold, and then he said in a deep voice, then what do you want? The big man from the north did not have much fear. The pirates under him were all from the north. Being able to establish a foothold here also meant that he was very strong. He laughed and said, I want to interfere with the share of the black market trade. Especially the slave smuggling. Seawolf, you've been swallowing this land for several years. At this time, you're not going to give it to everyone? We've been fighting on the sea for so long, and it's not enough for you to get a ticket for smuggling and slaves. These 2 places must be given up. Otherwise, the people here would not be willing to fight with a legendary figure for Narwhal's territory. You know, that sea area is still in Port Tylon, which is controlled by the Sea Temple. Many people began to respond to the words of the big man. There was not much morality among pirates. The most common thing they did was to use and betray others. Without real benefits, there were probably not many people here who were willing to work for the sea wolf. The things in Port Tylon were probably not enough to make up for their losses. They came here today mainly because they heard that the throat cutter was going to take over the shipwreck harbor. They had to come and listen to the news. Good. The sea wolf's expression was slightly cold, and a trace of killing intent appeared in his eyes. But he still nodded and said, "As long as we can defeat the throat cutter, I'm willing to take out half of my share of the black market for everyone. Kill the throat cutter first, and he could get back these things sooner or later." Chapter 219. Port Tylon, Sea Temple. At the bottom of the temple was connected to the sea. The Naga siren priest was standing in front of a high platform, waiting quietly. Soon there was a slight swimming sound in the sea, followed by a strong Naga siren guard swimming out of the sea. Then he stood upright and walked to her like a snake. He bowed slightly and said, "Your Excellency priest. The throat cutter has gone to Shipwreck Bay. He doesn't seem to want to ask for help from the temple." The Naga siren priest narrowed her eyes slightly and said slowly, "Really? It seems that he has the confidence to deal with those in Shipwreck Bay." The Naga siren guard hesitated for a moment and said in a deep voice, "Your Excellency priest? Why do we have to spend so much effort on this human? Although his strength is quite good, we also have many warriors who are not weaker than him. Besides, we also support a pirate king. Do we still need to invest so many resources in him?" The Naga siren priest had a strange smile on her face. She looked at him playfully and suddenly raised her hand to whip him. Then she said, "Do you need to question my arrangement? You are getting more and more presumptuous." The Naga siren guard did not say a word as he took the whip. The Naga siren priest seemed to be angry and laughed. She said in a deep voice, "Sure enough, you have a lot of confidence. What did the royal family promise you? Do you still have to swear allegiance to anyone?" The Naga siren guard hesitated for a moment and said slowly, "I will always be loyal to the sea goddess." "It's good that you know." The Naga siren priest looked at him coldly and said, "Although Ashrod is one of the 3 pirate kings, he is more inclined to the Naga siren royal family. His forces are more supported by the Naga siren royal family. Don't think that I don't know what those guys are thinking. Wasn't the last big purge enough? They want to resurrect that monster. Although the sea goddess has fallen into a deep sleep, she is still the master of the sea. No one can threaten her rule. It is impossible for a loser who has been killed by the goddess to rule the sea again." The Naga siren priest seemed to be warning something. Then she said slowly, "We need the power of that human. Although the faith of the sea goddess is spread all over the sea, it is mainly concentrated on the Naga sirens and the Murlocs. We don't have much faith among the humans. This is already the closest place to the humans. Just the coastal islands alone are already blocked by other forces. If we want to spread the faith of the goddess of ocean to all the places along the coast, we must rely on the power of human beings. There are too many humans. Their significance to the goddess is greater than the sea races. Although the Naga clan has many powerful believers, can they move around in human places? Could they spread the faith of the goddess on land? They can't even enter the coastal cities. Here, in this Port Tylon, we spent hundreds of years to gain a foothold, but even now, I can't appear in front of humans at will, because humans are a very xenophobic race. They fear us. There are very few cities along the coast that we can influence. The core forces of the Sea Temple are almost unable to enter these cities. We need the power of a human. That human is the easiest legend for us to rope in. Moreover, I can see the potential in him. If such a person can join the Sea Church, we should soon be able to spread our faith to the coastal cities. Send out the ghost ship. We need to pay attention to his movements. He actually thinks that he can deal with the Swamp King by subduing those pirates. Those trash may not even be able to stand under the Swamp King's monster. Right. The Naga siren priest thought for a moment and then said, "Pay attention to the movements of the devilfish. If necessary, let the co-fishmen intercept them. These monsters have been raised for a long time. Send someone to contact Ashrod. The son of Dagon has been seriously injured. This time, we must completely eliminate the believers of the King of the Deep. He will be a good bait. The Swamp King is a stupid and barbaric opponent. There is no way he can refuse the temptation of the Goddess of Ocean. As long as he can kill him, the Swamp King can perform the highest level of blasphemy sacrifice. The demon Lord Dagon will definitely be happy to respond to the sacrifice prayer held by the Goddess of Ocean. Shipwreck Bay. Soren stood at the bow of the ship and looked at the pirate ships in the distance. The number of ships in front of him was a little beyond his estimation. There were all kinds of flags hanging on them. Almost half of the pirates in Shipwreck Bay appeared here. However, there were not many warships that were a real threat. There were probably only about a dozen ships, and the rest were fast ships operating in the coastal waters. This kind of ship was prepared by the small pirates. They relied on speed to catch up with the cargo ship and then threw out the hook to board the ship. So many enemies. There was the sound of a pirate swallowing his saliva, and it seemed to be a little trembling. These trash could only fight with the wind. When they saw the number of enemies, their legs were a little weak. Adele Isabella seemed a little nervous. She picked up the monocular and took a look, then said, "Your Excellency. In addition to the sea wolf, there are other pirates. There are also northern pirates among them. I am afraid that many small pirates have been gathered by him." Soren frowned and did not speak. The morale of the pirates on his side was not high. This group of trash did not have much loyalty to speak of. When they saw the difference of almost 5 or 6 times, they did not have many thoughts of fighting in their hearts. He must let these trash summon up the courage to fight. Soren turned and stood on the high platform. He looked at the pirates on the 3 nearby warships, and then said in a cold voice, "Victory will belong to us. Shipwreck Bay will become our territory. And the bravest among you will become the captain of my fleet. Open your eyes. Look at how this group of trash is destroyed." Under the sea, a huge shadow began to move forward. The 20-meter-long killer whale gradually approached from the bottom of the sea. Soren's mouth showed a cruel smile. As he gently snapped his fingers, a small pirate ship in the distance suddenly shook violently, and then was directly overturned by a huge shadow in the sea. These coastal fast ships did not have the ability to resist the wind and waves at all. Some of them looked like large sailboats, and the size of the hull was not as big as the killer whale's body. Ah. Sea monster. Sea monster. There are sea monsters. Although he could not dominate the giant octopus, the killer whale was enough to deal with these trash. The grade 3 killer whale had a huge advantage in size. Its body of more than 20 meters could overturn those fast ships. Only a shadow could be seen swimming in the sea, and then one by one, the fast ships sank to the bottom of the sea. When he saw the number of enemies, Soren already had the idea of letting the killer whale consume them. He directly controlled the killer whale to kill a large number of pirates with brute force. A series of sounds of falling into the water were heard, and the number of enemies was reduced by nearly half. That was because there were too many trash in there. The sea was full of pirates. Many pirates desperately climbed onto the big ship, because in the sea, they were not enough to fill the gaps between the killer whale's teeth. This giant sea creature seemed to have signs of mutation. Perhaps it was because it had killed and devoured too many enemies. Prepare for battle. Adele obviously noticed that this was an opportunity. She glanced at her high-spirited subordinates and shouted, "Right full rudder. Gunners ready. Fire." Boom boom boom. A series of muffled sounds came. The power of the cannons in this era was not very great, and all of them were solid ammunition. However, the lethality was still there. Because the enemy was too dense, one of the gunners directly broke the mast of a warship. Half of the mast broke and made a sound of being overwhelmed. Then it fell to the deck with a rumble, and a few unlucky guys were killed on the spot. prepare for boarding battle." Adele pulled out the long sword at her waist. Some brave pirates also came to the deck. The cannons could only be regarded as decoration. The real deciding factor was the hand-to-hand combat. The alchemy in this world was strictly limited by the church and droll. These cannons were basically impossible to hit those powerful professions head-on, and the loading speed of the cannons was too slow. Soren's figure also disappeared at this moment. He needed a perfect massacre to establish his dignity. He needed to use absolute means to suppress these pirates. Killing was the best way. Chapter 220. Frost Kingdom, Arendelle. Princess Anna was awakened by a ray of light at dawn. She first opened her eyes, then stared blankly for a while as if she hadn't woken up yet. Then she stretched herself beautifully. The maids outside seemed to have heard the movement inside. Soon 2 pretty maids came in with dresses. One of them also held underwear. Her Royal Highness didn't like to sleep in clothes. The girl's beautiful body emerged under the thin velvet quilt. She gently lifted a corner of the quilt, revealing a piece of white and delicate skin. The temperature in the room was warm. The central crystal lamp lit up gently. This was an alchemy product that only the royal family could afford. Princess Anna stretched and yawned, then let the maids behind her put on her clothes one by one. Soon, she was dressed. A maid opened the window, and they could see the blue sea in the distance. Of course, it was not so simple for Her Royal Highness to get up. Behind her, 2 or 3 maids filed in. They brought in a silver basin, tools for washing, and the clothes and accessories to wear today. Princess Anna's expression seemed a little helpless. She gently wiped it with a towel and then whispered, "Take it down. I don't want to wear these today." One by one, the exquisite ornaments were brought out. Finally, Princess Anna chose a pair of crystal earrings. The maid behind her was combing her hair. Her long, silky blonde hair was combed into a beautiful hairstyle. She looked at the mirror inlaid with gold, then waved gently and said, "That's it. Where's my sister? Why didn't I see her today?" The girl slowly stood up. She was a little more delicate and quiet than before. Her thin face had regained its rosy color, and her body seemed to have grown a little. Her chest looked bulging after wearing the crystal dress. Princess Anna stood barefoot on the floor covered with a soft carpet. Suddenly, she seemed to have found something. She pulled the maid in front of her and gestured. Then she smiled and said, "Tina, have you become shorter? Or have I grown taller?" "Your Royal Highness has grown taller." The maid smiled, took a pair of delicate moccasins, and whispered, "Your Royal Highness has grown so much taller than before." She measured it with her fingers. It was probably less than a centimeter. It took Princess Anna nearly an hour to get up and dress up. After that, all the maids left, leaving only her 2 personal maids. She stretched a little and placed her slender hands on her waist. Then, she muttered, "It's a little tight. Am I a little fatter than before?" He had been sleeping a little too much recently. If she thought of that person, she would feel inexplicably wronged in her heart. Then, she would lie on the bed and sleep. Is he okay? Where is he now? Will he marry me? The young girl looked into the distance, lost in thought. The 2 maids beside her looked at each other and didn't say anything. If Her Royal Highness thought of that man, she couldn't help but stare blankly. They couldn't understand why the princess would like such an adventurer. Although the man was a little handsome and seemed to have some strength, he was still just an adventurer. There were many outstanding noble young men in the kingdom, and princes from other countries who wanted to marry her. In their opinion, any one of them was much better than an adventurer. Princess Anna didn't stay in a daze for long. In fact, she had gradually gotten used to it. The original impulse had completely subsided, but occasionally she would miss him. This kind of longing was not as strong as before, but she would still think of him from time to time. In the palace, Princess Anna came out in a red cloak. She looked at the captain of the guards in front of her and could not help but frown slightly. Where's my sister? Isn't she here? The captain of the guards bowed slightly and replied, Her Majesty the Queen has gone outside the palace and should be back soon. Is that so? Princess Anna nodded, then sat on the throne and began to deal with the documents. In fact, many things in Arendelle were now handled by her. The young girl opened the documents and read. Several maids stood next to her, conveying her orders from time to time. She flipped through the documents quickly. After reviewing a pile of documents, she looked up and murmured, My sister seems to have been going out a lot recently. What's the matter with her? The people next to her didn't answer. They couldn't ask about Her Majesty the Queen's affairs. Tap, tap, tap. A series of footsteps sounded, and then a handsome man came in. He had obvious northerner characteristics and was wearing heavy armor. When he saw Princess Anna on the throne, he bowed slightly and then said, Your Highness, the Vrykul people seem to be a little dishonest again. They attacked our fleet and looted many villages. Vrykul people? Princess Anna raised her head and frowned slightly. There was a trace of anger in her eyes. She said, Are those pirates dishonest again? She was the heir to the kingdom of Arendelle. Since she began to manage the kingdom, she had understood that one of the most troublesome problems of the kingdom was the Vrykul people. This group of human beings living in Iceland was very difficult to deal with. They were strong and barbaric. Because of the harsher living environment than the Frost Kingdom, they were born pirates and looters. These guys maintained an ancient, traditional, and barbaric belief. They believed that only the souls of those who died in battle could return to the kingdom of the gods they believed in, while the souls of those who died in bed could only fall into the river Styx. Therefore, these guys would always fight, and sometimes they would choose to end their lives with a battle. After the Princess Royal ascended the throne, she severely punished them. Although this made these natural pirates a lot more restrained, they still looted and attacked Arendelle from time to time every year because they did not have enough materials to live without looting. These guys believed in the totem god of war and liked to place dragon head symbols on their warships. Because of the god behind them, even the Princess Royal could not do anything to them sometimes. They were like locusts, attacking coastal areas and merchant ships every year. If they encountered the kingdom's army, these guys would flee back to Iceland. There were many people in this world who coveted Arendelle's wealth. The Vrykul people were just one of them. If it had not been for the Princess Royal's strong ascension to the throne, Arendelle would have fallen into war long ago. Princess Anna couldn't help but rub her forehead. For this kind of problem, she was often not as decisive as the elder princess. After all, she was just a young girl. The education she received in the past didn't give her enough experience to solve all this. She frowned and looked at the guard captain next to her and whispered, Hasn't my sister come back yet? Where did she go? The Princess Royal's recent movements were unknown. She seemed to have gathered a lot of court wizards. Recently, the affairs of the kingdom were handed over to Princess Anna. No one knew what she was going to do. Time passed little by little. At about noon, the figure of the Princess Royal appeared, and beside her stood a mysterious woman covered in a cloak. No one knew why. When Princess Anna saw the mysterious woman, she could not help frowning slightly. Her expression seemed to be a little repulsed. She did not like this woman. There was no reason, just a girl's intuition. Shipwreck Bay. Soren's figure shuttled through the crowd. Behind him were corpses. His very hazy figure moved like a ghost. Every time his sword appeared, there was an extra corpse behind him. The merciless slaughter was spreading. Soren's murderous aura was getting stronger and stronger. The effect of greater invisibility was weakening. Blood covered his whole body, making him look like he was emitting a trace of blood. The atmosphere of fear spread on the pirate ship, and the enemies gradually collapsed under the merciless slaughter. 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. Every time he ended a life, his aura increased a little, and his expression became colder. In the end, he was like a messenger of death, harvesting one life after another. Soren moved at high speed like a human-shaped killing machine. He did not stop until the cold prompt appeared. Slayer, background ability, you have become accustomed to death and blood in the repeated killings. Ending lives is not difficult or scary for you. Hundreds of lives have been ended in your hands. You have begun to ignore death and life. In battle, you will awaken the ability of the Slayer, which will bring great pressure to your enemies. Anyone who fights with you must go through a test of will. Otherwise, they will fall into a state of panic because of fear. Permanent will +2, intimidation +20, now is the time. Soren stood in the midst of the broken limbs on the ground. Suddenly, a divine light appeared in his eyes, and then an invisible energy spread out. The nearby enemies seemed to feel a great fear, as if they had been hit by the fear spell and ran for their lives. This fear was so difficult to resist. It was like a brand in their hearts. Not only the enemies of Soren, but even the men he recruited felt inexplicable fear. It was as if even their souls were trembling. The divinity value was rapidly changing. Just when Soren's aura reached its peak, in a room in Port Tylon, Vivian's figure also floated strangely. Her white little hands seemed to move, her eyelids trembled slightly, then her index finger bent and moved, and then her lips moved slightly as if she was making some sound. Suddenly, she opened her eyes and subconsciously shouted out a sentence. "Brother." Vivian's petite figure fell from the air. She looked at the white princess dress on her body and did not seem to like it very much. She waved her hand and changed into a black princess dress. She gently turned around, then smiled and said, "Sure enough, that idiot was not as fast as me. It's finally my turn to come out. Brother? Where is brother?" Chapter 221. Shipwreck Bay, Lone Wolf Island. Soren sat in the main chair in the hall, then silently looked at the captives in front of him. A large number of people were kneeling in front of him. All of them were the pirates who fought with Soren. These guys were stunned from the beginning to the end. They had just reacted to the attack of the mutant killer whale, but they were scared out of their wits by Soren's slaughter form. The overall strength of the pirates was still very good. On average, they could reach about grade 2, which was equivalent to the city guards in various places. However, they did not have such a strict training method. Their fighting style was more of a guerrilla warfare, and there was no way to form a formation in the sea. If a wave hit the hull and shook the ship, it would be a tragedy if they did not have enough sense of balance. Therefore, most of the pirates were agile melee professions. Some of the more advanced pirates could even fight on the mast. Seawolf was a grade 4 warrior. Soren found that it was really easy for him to deal with the warrior now. Maybe it was because of the suppression of attributes, his strength and speed in the slaughterer form were obviously higher than the enemy. A shadow jump and backstab directly killed Seawolf. Soren still remembered the expression of the other party when he died. It could even be said that when Soren transformed into the slaughterer form, he was basically invincible. The number of captives captured was quite large. After killing Seawolf, the other party almost collapsed. The only one that escaped was a dragon-head ship, which was the warship of the northern pirates. They seemed to have the blood of the Vrykul people, and many of them could enter berserk. Soren could not stop them, so they escaped from the battlefield. The Vrykul people were a very powerful human race. Although they were of human descent, they were a branch of ancient humans. They were a race that could awaken berserk skills on their own. This was very similar to the ancient Anya people. They were a branch of the Arcane Empire. They had better magic talent and could live to about 150 years old. This human race was relatively rare, and some of them could live as long as half-elves. It was said that their ancestors improved their own bloodline during the Arcane Empire, and a part of the human potential was brought to the extreme. This group of people aged very slowly. The Vrykul people were similar to the human race, but their origin was not very clear. Because they had lost their history. Soren slowly stood up and glanced at the people in front of him. He then said in a deep voice, "You should have heard of my name. Make a choice. Submit or die. Those who submit to me will receive the benefits of Shipwreck Bay. I will give them relative freedom and become my subordinate pirate. They will hand over 30% of the spoils, but they must also respond to my call when I need them. You should feel lucky because I'm in a good mood today. Otherwise, many of you would have died. I'll give you 30 seconds to think about it. You should learn to thank me for my kindness. Soren was in a good mood. Because he had completed the fusion of the divinity, and also felt Vivian's awakening. Although he tried to use a telepathic connection to tell Vivian to wait for his return, he didn't know if it would work. There was an obvious telepathic connection between the two of them, but it was not so strong that they could feel each other's consciousness. The fusion of the divinity from the golden bones was very easy because there was only a weak consciousness left on it. The only troublesome thing was the divinity of fear. However, Soren found that after the last battle, it was much easier to kill the will of the Dread Lord this time. Maybe it was because the Dread Lord was very murderous at that time. His current divinity value was 9 points. Soren did not gain any additional abilities, but only increased the strength of the divinity extension ability. He still needed 1 divinity point to upgrade to minor divinity. At that time, he would get an additional divinity reward of +1 to all attributes. Minor divinity, intermediate divinity, great divinity. The number of divinities needed to upgrade increased exponentially, but the effect was also very amazing. Great divinity could increase all attributes by 4 points, and it could also be stacked with the attributes added by the divinity level. Great divinity and great divinity level were equal to an increase of 8 points in all attributes. That was why the saints were so powerful. As for the divinity level, it was another kind of power. Divinity did not increase attributes, but it could release divine spells and a large number of spell-like abilities. In theory, when the divinity was full of divinity, the divinity points could be used as mana directly. Divinity could directly affect the rules, and when necessary, it could also change the rules in a small area. In the long history, although there were wars between the gods, there were very few wars in the kingdom of God. It was because the gods had unlimited spells in the kingdom of God. As long as their divinity was not exhausted, their spells were unlimited. However, the material plane could not accommodate too much divinity, because the kingdom of God was a domain world with a semi-energy structure. The material plane was a different situation. The incarnation of the gods could only mobilize a part of the power. Soren got the answer he wanted. He looked with satisfaction at the pirates in front of him who were full of fear and humility at the same time. These guys seemed to be honest. Although they did not have much loyalty, Soren only needed them to submit to him. The real fighting power was not these guys. Your Excellency. Soren's promoted first mate quickly walked in. After this battle, the pirates who were first subdued seemed to be more united. They obviously regarded themselves as Soren's confidants, and because of the victory of the battle, there was an additional sense of worship. After all, pirates were a group of people who liked to follow the strong. The young first mate looked at the others in the hall, then bowed and said, "Your Excellency, you'd better take a look at the back. We found some strange captives in the Seawolf cellar." "Yes." Soren heard this and narrowed his eyes slightly, then got up and walked outside. Adele was also waiting outside. When she saw Soren, she immediately nodded and whispered, "There are 3 people in the Seawolf cellar. They don't look human. They look a little strange." Soren nodded and walked towards the cellar. At the same time, he said, "You go and supervise the wealth. Anyone who dares to hide it will be killed. I'll go down and take a look." Adele's expression was serious, and a cold light appeared in her eyes. She nodded without hesitation. For a while now. She already knew that Soren was the kind of person who paid attention to rules. Those who did not follow the rules set by him would be killed without mercy. The cellar was very dark. Soren's men quickly lit a torch. When he walked in and took a look, Soren's face showed a trace of surprise. Because there were 3 humanoid creatures shackled in the cellar. They looked a little similar to elves, but their skin was grayish-black. Their pupils were slightly red, a little scarlet, and their hair was snow-white. They looked tall and strong, and their bodies were full of a sense of strength and coordination. This meant that they were naturally stronger than ordinary people. These creatures had a higher starting point and talent. Drows? Soren glanced at the three guys who looked tired and had many wounds on their bodies. It seemed that they had been hungry for a long time. He murmured, "No. Is it a half-drow bloodline? Which branch of drows are you descendants of?" The other party tiredly raised his head and opened his mouth to say something, but no sound came out. He was too tired. He also seemed to be very hungry. He didn't even have the strength to speak. Drows were born with high attributes, and they also had a strong racial bonus. If such an enemy was not affected by hunger, it would be very dangerous even if their hands and feet were shackled. Soren glanced at them and ordered, "Give them some food and water. Then bring them up." After that, he turned and walked outside. He didn't expect to encounter drows on the surface world. Although they looked like half-drows, it was still a very rare thing. He didn't know where Seawolf caught them. Time passed by little. When Soren waited in the hall for half an hour, his men brought up the three exhausted half-drows. They seemed to have recovered a little energy after eating, but their condition was still very bad. It seemed that they had been trapped in the cellar for a while. Only with their racial talent could they withstand it. If it was a slightly weaker ordinary person, they might have died in there. These half-drows had handsome faces. They were all men, and their strength seemed to be close to grade 3. Soren glanced at them, frowned slightly, and then said, "Who do you believe in?" This sentence seemed to have a special meaning. One of the drows, who looked like the leader, raised his head and said in a low and hoarse voice, "We believe in the Dark Maiden." Sure enough, they were believers of the Dark Maiden. Soren's eyes showed a hint of understanding. It seemed that he was not surprised by this answer. He stood up and looked at the half-drow in front of him, then pulled out his curved sword and put it on his shoulder, and said in a low voice, "The Dark Maiden has fallen. If I remember correctly, your branch of drows has been slaughtered by the Queen of Spiders. I'm very curious as to why there is still a branch like yours left. Did you escape the Queen of Spiders' pursuit?" Soren lifted his hair with his curved sword and saw a special mark, which seemed to be a family emblem. This was not a lone half-drow. He came from a family of drows. In Soren's memory, this branch of drows was almost dead, but he didn't expect to meet them overseas. Could it be that one of them escaped overseas and avoided the Queen of Spiders' pursuit? Chapter 222. The Dark Maiden. She was a very special deity because she was the only deity in the good camp among the drows. The Dark Maiden was a goddess full of melancholy and sorrow. In addition to protecting all the good drows, she also protected those drows who hoped to return to the surface world and live in peace. Most of the evil drows were burning with anger against this good goddess, but for those drows who tried to escape from the Queen of Spiders, she was a welcome ray of hope. The Dark Maiden loved beauty and peace, but she was not stingy with fighting back against those who tried to hurt her believers. Her appearance was that of a tall dark elf with smooth and soft skin, with long silver hair that flowed to her ankles. She was called Lei Feng by many people, and was a very good and kind god. Unfortunately, she died. She was the daughter of the Elven King and the former Queen of Elves, the daughter of the current Queen of Spiders, but she died in the hands of her own mother. The Queen of Spiders was still the final victor. She killed her own daughter, the Dark Maiden of the past, and then took her divine power and priesthood, and thus completely unified the drows in the Underdark. There had never been a god that made Soren so afraid. The Queen of Spiders was definitely the only one. He still remembered the fear when he served this evil goddess, and her various desires and needs. If the nature of a woman was fickle, then the nature of a goddess was even more fickle. No one could understand the thoughts of the Queen of Spiders. In the past, the Dark Maiden accidentally joined the Queen of Spiders' rebellion plan and was exiled by the Elven King. She protected the good drows who wanted to return to the surface. She once had many believers and followers in the Underdark, but after her fall, these people were mercilessly slaughtered by the Queen of Spiders. The Elven King tried to accept some of her believers, but there seemed to be some disputes later. The other elves could not accept these fallen ones. Anyway, in Soren's memory, the believers, priests, and followers of the Dark Maiden ended up very miserable. If they were caught by the priests of the Queen of Spiders, they would eventually experience inhumane torture, or even be turned into spider demons. Soren was really surprised. He didn't expect to meet drows overseas, and they seemed to be a branch of a certain family. In order to adapt to life on the surface, they seemed to have mixed blood with humans. After hearing Soren's words, there was a trace of sadness in the eyes of the drow in front of him. He looked at Soren silently, as if he did not care about the curved sword on his neck. There were many stubborn drows because their living environment was very cruel. Perhaps because of their racial talent, male drows were good fighters, while female drows had more advantages as spellcasters. Their tradition was that only females could become priests. Even among the followers of the Dark Maiden, most of them were female priests. The man stared at Soren in silence, as if he had seen through life and death. His eyes were full of vicissitudes of life, as if he had gone through countless hardships. However, when he saw the scimitar in Soren's hand, his expression changed, and a hint of excitement appeared. Icing death. He slowly opened his mouth and spoke in a hoarse voice in the language of the drows. This pronunciation attracted the attention of his other two companions. When they saw the curved sword in Soren's hand, they could not help but show a trace of shock on their faces, and then they knelt in front of him. The leader of the drows looked excited. He reached out and gently stroked the curved sword, then retracted his fingers as if he had been electrocuted. Then he humbly bowed his head to Soren in front of him and said, "Your Excellency is the master of icing death. Please accept my humble respect." Icing death? Soren froze for a moment, then looked at the expression of the drows. He frowned slightly as if he remembered something. It seemed that the previous owner of the legendary curved sword Icing Death was a legendary drows. He had a high reputation among the believers of the Dark Maiden. If these drows were believers of the Dark Maiden, they might really know this curved sword. But the Dark Maiden had fallen for so long, how could they still maintain their faith? These guys was really tough. Maybe they are useful to me? Soren thought for a moment. He looked at the drows in front of him and asked directly, "Where are you from? How many people are there in your tribe? Why are you here?" In the face of Soren's continuous questions, the drows in front of him hesitated, but after looking at each other, they slowly told him what had happened. It turned out that after the Dark Maiden died in the hands of her mother, the Queen of Spiders, their tribe began to flee the Underdark. Some of them were accepted by the Elven Lord God, but in the end, there were differences because they could not integrate. Another group came to the surface world and mixed with human blood, and a group of half-drows was born. For example, these drows in front of him had a quarter of human blood. This group of drows had a hard time. Because they had lost the protection of the Dark Maiden, they had completely become helpless lambs. The priests of the Queen of Spiders were chasing them, and various forces on the surface were not kind to them. After all, drows were born evil creatures. Many races could not get along with them, and many elves were even hostile to them during the long struggle. In the end, they had to migrate. They moved to many places in a row, and finally found a little space to live in the desolate overseas area. However, without their god, their population was getting smaller and smaller, and their strength was getting weaker. Even if they had many excellent warriors, they might not be able to gain the upper hand when fighting against some indigenous tribes. Because they had lost their god, they had no priests, they had lost their inheritance and knowledge, and it was difficult for wizards to be born among them. The only spellcasters left were only a few warlocks. In this world, without the support of spellcasters, it was difficult to change everything just by relying on a group of excellent warriors. They lacked food, weapons, and all kinds of materials. They had not adapted to the primitive and barbaric environment, and they had no way to resist the attacks of various monsters. The three of them quietly used magic to disguise themselves as humans and came to Shipwreck Bay. They originally planned to quietly buy a batch of materials to go back and survive this difficult period, but they did not expect that they underestimated the cunning of the human gangs. They accidentally exposed themselves during the operation. The final result was needless to say. They were surrounded by enemies several times, then captured by the sea-wolf. After that, they were locked in the cellar. The sea-wolf probably did not know what to do with these half-drows. Sure enough, it was a history of blood and tears. If a race lost the protection of a god, it would be considered good if they didn't die out. It was almost impossible for them to live a good life. Without a god, there would be no priests, and without priests, there would be no divine spells. Without the healing divine spells, without the blessing of the temple, without a large number of spellcasters, it was almost impossible to maintain the strength of a race just by relying on the inheritance of the warlocks. The weaker they were, the less ability they had to cultivate wizards. In the end, they would probably become warriors. Spellcasters were always indispensable, otherwise, Soren would not call them spellcasters. A race must have spellcasters in its high-end force. Their existence was as deterrent as a nuclear bomb. Could they be subdued? Soren was thinking about a question in his mind. With his understanding of the drows, he knew that these people naturally liked to obey the strong, especially when they were in a desperate situation. However, a race of drows, even if they were weak, would be stronger than him now. Since the drows were born to be stubborn, Soren could not show enough strength, and he might not be able to subdue them. He looked at the half-drows in front of him and said in a deep voice, "How many people do you have?" The drows in front of him hesitated for a moment, then said, "We have more than 800 people, more than half of them are warriors." More than 400 drow warriors? Soren's eyes suddenly lit up. He suddenly felt very excited because these were all warriors close to grade 3. It was normal for them to have grade 4 warriors. He thought for a moment, then said in a deep voice, "I will give you a cargo ship and some people. It will be filled with food, medicine, weapons, and supplies. You can take it back to your race." Surprise. Unbelievable surprise. The 3 drows looked at Soren with unimaginable eyes, and then knelt on the ground as if they were about to cry. They buried their heads deeply and said excitedly, "Thank you, sir. Thank you very much." It seemed that they were indeed living a hard life. The estrangement between races, the unfamiliar environment, the inability to trade with other creatures, and the complete self-sufficiency made it difficult to live in the primitive and barbaric overseas. Because there were too many dangers there. Soren looked at the drows in front of him, paused for a moment, and said, "These materials should be enough for you to survive for a while, but you still need to choose your own path in the future. Without the protection of the Dark Maiden, you may not even be able to defeat the indigenous people. For some reasons, I can help you, but only this time. As for your future, it depends on your own choice. It won't take long. I will also enter the overseas islands. I hope you can give me the answer I want." Soren stood up slowly. Then he waved his hand and ordered his men to prepare a cargo ship and supplies for them. A large number of goods were stored on this island. Chapter 223. The value of the sea-wolf was quite high. Although Soren only found about 7 or 8,000 kindler pieces, the various goods and jewels were worth 20 to 30,000 kindler pieces. This did not include the profits from the black market in Shipwreck Bay. If he sent someone to take over this place, the final profit would be more than 50,000 kindler pieces. Don't underestimate this wealth. Soren had risked his life many times in order to earn some kindler pieces. The polarization of wealth in this world was even more serious than in his previous life. The higher one went, the more wealth one would have. The tax of the Ming dynasty was about 3 to 5 million taels of silver a year. France only had about 800,000 gold coins a year at the same time. The tax of the principalities in this world was about the same. Perhaps some kingdoms could reach millions of kindler pieces, but it had to be a rich kingdom like Arendelle. In the Ming dynasty, it was easy to kill a few rich merchants and get a year's tax. In the English and French dynasties, there were many nobles who were richer than the king. The distribution of wealth in this world was not fair at all. The money Soren earned from killing 2 groups of pirates was equivalent to a city's tax for nearly a year. This money was very useful. Although many of them were goods, there were ways to get rid of them. If it weren't for the wealth accumulated from killing the pirates, Soren would not have easily given away a ship's worth of goods. This was a very necessary investment. With the intelligence of the drows, they naturally knew what Soren wanted. However, because he was not strong enough, Soren wisely did not speak. If he spoke and the other party did not agree, it would be easy to create estrangement. It was better to get closer to them first, and then after he opened up his own situation, he could conquer them all at once. The value of these drows was amazing. Not only were they strong, but more importantly, they could be a source of faith and build the framework of a church. Because there must be a priest of the Dark Maiden among them. Without the leadership of a priest, they could not have lasted for so long. Of course, their value was more than that. Changing faith was a difficult thing. Even if they could not be the source of faith for Vivian to fight against the Dread Lord and the demigod vampire in the future, they could also help Vivian expand her faith and complete the framework of the church. Taking a step back, these people could even become the foundation for Soren to become a god. The Avatar Crisis was a big game of chess. Only the gods were qualified to play on the chessboard. No matter what Soren planned to do in the future, it was never wrong to get the qualification of the gods first. The Avatar Crisis was the most chaotic period, but it was definitely not the end of the chaos. After the end of this turbulent period, although a certain peace was restored in the mortal world, the battle between the gods became more and more obvious. If he and Vivian defeated the demigod vampire and the Dread Lord, then they would have to face the gods of the upper plane and the demons of the lower plane. A new god was definitely the easiest enemy for them to deal with. Without the foundation from faith and the church, Vivian would become a lamb in the eyes of all the demons in the future. Soren was a half-elf. These drows also had human blood in order to adapt to the surface life. If he remembered correctly, the first gods to fall during the Avatar Crisis were the god of half-elves and the god of rogues. This meant that 2 clergy areas would be vacant in the future. These 2 clergy areas were half-elves and rogues. Although these were only weak clergy areas, they could help Soren go further. In the future, it would be much easier to fight against the Dread Lord as a god than to fight against him as a mortal. The demigod vampire had succeeded in becoming a god. They had to speed up and catch up with him. These drows were all half-elves. Soren could give up his life for Vivian. He even thought of transforming into a shadow lich. If Vivian could not become a god to fight against the Dread Lord, then he would become a god to fight against them. After all, Vivian was not a vampire. She had been branded by the Dread Lord. The demigod vampire was a very smart guy. He actually knew to use the vampiric clergy area to make himself a god first. This undoubtedly gave Soren a little inspiration. Since the demigod vampire could use the inconspicuous vampiric domain to become a god, then it was not impossible for him to use his own half-elven bloodline as a springboard to master the half-elven clergy in the future. With the clergy, Soren would at least be in the form of a saint in the future. As long as he was in the form of a saint, Soren would have the confidence to fight against any god's incarnation of a saint. This was a very long road. Soren also had a vague direction after seeing these half-drows. The demigod vampire gave him the greatest inspiration, because if he used the half-drows as a springboard to become a god after his strength reached a certain level, then he could seek the clergy of the half-elves after the time of troubles began. In this way, the half-elves in the whole world could be used as a reserve base for him to develop his believers, and there would not be too fierce a conflict with other ancient gods. This was a very weak clergy. But for Soren, it was a very important springboard, because his ultimate goal was definitely not this. Because he had the divinity of slaughter. The road to becoming a god was extremely difficult. But if Soren intended to take this road, then he must plan in advance. Otherwise, he would not have so much time. This was something to be thankful for. It seemed that from the beginning to the present, all his legend points were related to slaughter, whether it was the legend of the throat cutter or other legendary events. The demigod vampire had not fallen. As a new god, as long as he did not fall, his strength was increasing day by day, and his divine power was growing day by day. Soren had opened up a situation, and he could not let the other party widen the gap between them. A day passed quickly. The pirates prepared a cargo ship and then loaded the island supplies. After a night of rest, the drows recovered a lot. Before Soren sent them away, he handed them a letter and said, "Give this letter to the leader of your tribe. Maybe she will understand what to do in the future. I look forward to your reply." The leader of the half-drows bowed humbly, then reached out to take the letter and put it close to his body, and said, "We are very grateful for your help, and we are willing to help you when you need it." Soren nodded gently and said, "Go. I think your tribe has been waiting for you for a long time." The 3 half-drows in front of him bowed again and then walked onto the cargo ship. They were undoubtedly lucky to have met Soren at the most desperate moment. Not only did they keep their lives, but they also brought back a ship's worth of goods. But this was just that. If they could not prove their value, or come up with an equivalent benefit, they would no longer be able to get help from this lord. As drows from the Underdark, they knew very well that all the effort was for the sake of getting a return. Soren watched the departing cargo ship, then turned to look at Adele, and said in a deep voice, "Send someone to take over the black market trade in Shipwreck Bay. We can give some of the benefits to the local forces, but the slave trade must be in our hands." Slave trade? There was a trace of doubt on Adele's face, but she had gradually begun to get used to Soren's orders. She did not ask much and was ready to arrange the manpower. A group of pirates in Shipwreck Bay had been wiped out, and Soren needed to support a group of pirates who could work for him. Since the demigod vampire could use the vampiric realm to touch fear, then Soren could naturally try to use the half-elven realm to touch slaughter. In all aspects, Soren actually had an advantage, because no matter whether he became a god or not many people would be energetic enough to run thousands of miles to kill him. This was the key to his focus on the outer islands. With more and more cards in his hands, Soren's vision became clearer and clearer. As long as he controlled the pirates, it was equivalent to holding the sea route. If they wanted to deal with him, they had to go through the sea first. Chapter 224. Port Tylon, Sea Temple. The Naga Siren priest stood on the high platform below the temple and looked at the news that came back. She frowned and murmured, "He defeated those pirates so quickly. It seems that we still underestimated his strength and means. We must have such a person in our hands. Otherwise, he is too dangerous. What's more, the sea goddess has not responded to my prayers recently. We must strengthen our control of the sea." Legendary professions all had the ability to dominate a region. A city had at most 1 or 2 legendary professions. Soren's rapid rise made her a little wary. She was a little worried that there would be an uncontrollable pirate force. In just a few days, Soren had unified part of the south coast. Even she couldn't do such a thing. However, there was also a trace of fear in her heart because from the information she collected from all aspects, she found that Soren was an extremely decisive person. Such a person must not be pushed too hard. There was a moment of silence. A strange smile appeared on the Naga Siren priest's mouth, and she said slowly, "Reveal all his information to the Swamp King and inform the others not to help him secretly. His reputation has spread a little too far. To deal with such a person, we must suppress his arrogance and then draw him over. Otherwise, the stronger he is, the harder it is for us to control him." "Right. Pay attention to that little girl. Maybe she will be useful." On the roof. Lillian's petite figure sat on the roof. Her white feet were hanging outside the eaves. If others saw it, they would be shocked. After all, it was close to the height of a 3-story building, and the little girl was obviously only 8 or 9 years old. She tidied up her skirt with her white and tender hands, then looked at the sea in the distance. From time to time, she would tilt her head and play with her hair. Sometimes it was a single ponytail, and sometimes it was a double ponytail. She also pouted and said, "My hair is so short. It doesn't look good even if I tie it up. This stupid Vivian. When can my hair reach my waist? I really want to grow up quickly." She swung her fair feet and her little head from side to side, as if she was bored. She sang in a childish voice that was out of tune. We are bad guys. We are villains. They are afraid of us. No one will dare to bully us anymore. Ba ba ba. Who dares to bully me, the Witch of Terror, Lillian? Stupid Vivian. He couldn't even come up with the lyrics properly. What a useless idiot. He was tone deaf. Just as Lillian was blaming Vivian for her poor singing, an angry Loli's voice rang in her head. Idiot. Idiot. You're the idiot. Let me out quickly. Otherwise, if Big Brother finds out, he will definitely spank you. The little girl curled her lips playfully, revealing a sly smile as she muttered to herself, I'm not going to let you out, I'm not going to let you out. Bite me. I won't bite you. Vivian said weakly, I won't be fooled again. I was fooled by you last time. I'm also in pain after biting him. Poochie. Lillian giggled playfully. That's why I said you're an idiot. We share the same body, so it's natural for me to feel pain for you. Do you think you won't feel pain just because I have the control? The two of them had been together for a long time. It seemed that they had crossed swords like this many times, and there seemed to be some dark history. I'm so bored. Lillian lay on the roof, swinging her little feet in boredom as she muttered to herself, when will Big Brother come back? Why don't we go kill people and set fires? That's how that vampire gathered his power. Maybe we can also become gods. It's all because of you, idiot, that I woke up so late and didn't get a lot of power and knowledge. Now I can't even defeat that vampire. Vivian said weakly, you're the one who's useless. I lent you my power last time, but you still couldn't defeat him. How can you blame me? And don't kill people. Vivian. Vivian doesn't like this. They're all innocent people. Lillian curled her lips helplessly, then raised her hand to mess up her hair. Like a little loli who had gone berserk, she said frantically, it's all your fault. I've been influenced by you after staying with you for so long. You've made me weak. Vivian said stubbornly, this isn't weakness. This is. Anyway, I don't know what this is. But it's wrong to kill people. Big Brother won't kill innocent people. He won't like you like this. Oh. This sentence seemed to have an effect on Lillian, but in the next moment, her eyes rolled and she muttered to herself, no, that's not right. Big Brother also kills people, but he likes to kill bad people. Ah. This port is full of bad people. Let's go kill bad people too. That way, Big Brother won't be angry. The little girl flew up. Vivian seemed to be frightened and hurriedly said, no. You're crazy. You lunatic. I'll get angry if you continue like this. Plop. Lillian, who had just flown up, suddenly fell down. Although the fall was very low, she still couldn't help but reach out to cover her little butt. She jumped up and down like an angry cat and said, you're crazy. You're actually restricting my strength. Don't you know that we might both die from the fall? No. How can you restrict my strength? I'm the only one who can restrict your strength. Why are you suddenly more powerful than me? I'm the Witch of Fear. This isn't fair. Vivian's voice seemed to be a little surprised as she muttered, I don't know either. But it seems that I can really control it. Haha. Who told you to always call me an idiot? Let's see if you still dare to be naughty. Humph. Do you believe that I'll teach you how to be a good person? Vivian was a very well-behaved little girl. But this didn't mean that she didn't have a temper. If someone slandered and looked down on Soren, she would instantly become an angry kitten. She was very smart. So her pure heart didn't mean that she knew nothing about the world. It was just that the filth she saw in the world wouldn't affect her heart. She was still kind by nature. Perhaps there were times when she was a little naughty and mischievous, but this couldn't hide her kind nature. Perhaps only when she was related to Sauron would she give up on the concept of good and evil. Otherwise, she would be a very, very nice girl most of the time. She actually didn't like killing. Compared to the unruly and willful Lillian, she was a little girl who could happily sing while cleaning the house with a broom. She didn't like reading because she would get sleepy easily. But she still felt that she should do something because she was going to be 9 years old soon. She wanted to become a little girl who could help her brother. In the end, she was actually a little evil. Brother's aura. Lillian suddenly stopped freaking out. She patted her little butt with her little hand and then ran outside like the wind. Soren's figure appeared in the distance. Big brother. The little girl's cute little face revealed a happy expression. She flew into Soren's arms, hugged his neck with her little hands, and hung herself on him. Vivian. Soren smiled and hugged the little Vivian tightly. It was only at this moment that he revealed a sincere smile on his face. When the little girl heard the name Vivian, she was obviously stunned for a moment. Then, she returned to her senses as if nothing had happened. She curled up her petite body like a kitten in Soren's arms and said coquettishly, "Big brother. Hoo hoo hoo. Vivian missed you so much." At the same time, a furious voice appeared in her mind, "Lillian. Don't impersonate me." Chapter 225. Vivian seemed to be a lot more lively today. In Soren's memory, Vivian had always been a quiet and obedient little girl. It was rare to see her so lively and mischievous. She would only appear occasionally when she was in a good mood. Soren didn't suspect anything, because he was a person who trusted his intuition. He could clearly feel that Vivian was still his Vivian. Perhaps it was because the two of them hadn't been this close for a long time, but he felt a trace of excitement in his heart. It was rare for him to feel a trace of warmth after a massacre. Soren reached out and stroked Vivian's little head. He lowered his head and kissed her hair. He didn't know if it was just his imagination, but he felt that Vivian was a little taller and heavier than before. She would be 9 years old in a month. Oh. Brother. The little girl was like a little kitten in his arms for a while. She finally calmed down and her breathing became more relaxed. She raised her little head and pressed her cheek against Soren's cheek. She then gently rubbed against it, as if this was the only way to express her longing and attachment. However, she soon frowned and widened her eyes. She then raised her little hand and touched her red cheeks. She pouted and muttered, "So prickly. Brother, you've grown a beard." Pa. Soren didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He raised his hand and lightly patted her little butt. He reached out and touched his chin. He realized that he had indeed grown a beard. He rarely had a good night's sleep. Perhaps it was because he stayed up too much that his beard grew. After all, his extraordinary physique only ensured that he had enough energy. He reached out and hugged the little girl. He spun around and placed her petite body on his shoulder. Vivian let out a crisp giggle. She reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. She was a little girl who was easily satisfied. She would be very happy as long as he coaxed her a little. However, just as Soren was about to bring the girl back to his residence, an inappropriate voice suddenly sounded, "Sir Soren. Priest Duran asked you to go to the temple." A fully armored temple guard appeared nearby and bowed slightly. "Priest Duran wishes for you to go there now." Soren frowned slightly when he heard that. Vivian pouted in dissatisfaction. Her beautiful eyes narrowed slightly, and a cold glint appeared in her eyes where Soren couldn't see. It was as if she had a murderous intent after being disturbed. If it wasn't for Soren's presence, she would have used her finger of death to get rid of this annoying guy. How dare he interrupt her time with her brother? They hadn't been together for a long time. If it wasn't for the fact that she was waiting for her brother to come back, she would have already run out and started a massacre. This guy was really annoying just by looking at him. Yes. Although Soren frowned in displeasure, he still nodded gently and said, "I'll be there in a while." After that, he gently put down Vivian and leaned over to her ear and said apologetically, "Vivian, go back first. I'll be back in a while." Priest Duran may have some matters to discuss with me. I'll tell you some things in the evening. Although the little girl was a little unhappy, she still nodded obediently, and then whispered, yes. I'll be good at home and wait for my brother to come back. Soren smiled and touched her little head, then turned and walked toward the sea temple. Just as he turned to leave, a cold glint flashed in Vivian's eyes. She glared at the temple guard in front of her, and a faint radiance of divinity appeared around her. The temple guard's expression turned a little dazed. Then, as if he had just seen a ghost, he revealed a terrified expression. The temple guard threw away his weapon and fled in a panic. It was as if he couldn't see his surroundings at all. In the end, his head slammed into the wall, and the temple guard who was close to Tier 3 was knocked unconscious. Humph. Lillian clapped her hands in satisfaction and said, "You're lucky that you dared to disturb my reunion with my brother. If I wasn't in a good mood today, I would have directly rewarded you with a finger of death." Idiot Vivian. Say something. Why are you suddenly not talking? The little girl tidied up the hem of her black princess dress, then untied the hair tie, and muttered as if talking to herself, "Are you mute? Didn't you look like you were going to fight me to the death?" After a long while, Vivian's soft voice sounded, and she seemed to be a little depressed. "I'm thinking about how we should tell my brother." Tell him what? Lillian seemed to be a little confused. Vivian's tone was a little higher, and she seemed to be hesitant. Us. You and me. How should we tell my brother? You actually pretended to be me just now. This proves that you're a little guilty in your heart. You don't dare to tell my brother that you're Lillian because you're afraid that he won't like you. You're scared. Actually, I'm a little scared too. Because I don't know what we are. You remember everything I remember. I also remember everything you know. But you're Lillian. I'm also me, I'm Vivian. At first, Lillian seemed to be about to explode when she heard this and wanted to refute, but then her expression became downcast. She gently played with her white little fingers and muttered, Who said that? I'm not worried that my brother won't like me. Who wants to pretend to be an idiot like you? I'm just worried that my brother won't be able to adapt all of a sudden. Yes. That's it. The little girl nodded fiercely, as if that was how it should be. Vivian seemed to want to laugh a little and continued, "That's why I'm thinking about what we should do. This is too strange. I've read a lot of books from Sister Gloria, but there's no such situation in the books. I'm worried that we'll always be like this. In the future, you and I will be in this body. If that's the case, we have to try to get along well." Lillian was silent when she heard this. It seemed that she didn't quite understand why such a situation would happen. Vivian paused for a moment, then said in a low voice, "Actually, I have an idea. Now, no one knows about our situation except for us, so I think we'd better hide it from my brother first. It's better to wait until we figure out what's going on with our bodies and then tell him. I'm worried. I'm worried that only one of us can survive in the end. You're the real son of fear. If you survive in the end, can you replace me and stay by my brother's side? Lillian. I don't actually hate you. Although you're disobedient and a little willful." There was a short silence. There seemed to be a trace of moisture in Lillian's eyes, and her beautiful big eyes were a little teary. Her voice was inexplicably choked. Idiot. Idiot. What nonsense are you talking about? How can you die? I'll never let anything happen to you. You're you, and I'm me. Isn't it good for us to be together? Why do you have to say such things? You're making me so sad. Vivian's weak voice sounded, "Oh. I'm just saying what if." Pat head. Don't cry. I should be the elder sister. Come on. Lillian, be good. Call me elder sister. The choking voice was cut off. Lillian instantly jumped up like a kitten that had its hair standing on end. She said frantically, "Sister, your sister. I'm the elder sister. You're the younger sister." Stupid Vivian. You're so useless. You must be the younger sister. Vivian still spoke in a weak tone, but the words that came out of her mouth made Lillian fly into a rage. Good girl. Little Lillian, don't be naughty. Call me elder sister. You woke up so late. You must be the younger sister. Frantic. Lillian was so angry that she stomped her feet, but there was nothing she could do. After a while, she calmed down and whispered, What should we do in the future? How can we hide it from my brother? He's very smart. Vivian seemed to be silent for a moment. Then, she said weakly, How about this? In the future, whenever you come out, I'll come out as well. Don't be too lawless. My brother might not be used to it in the beginning, but he'll get used to it soon. After all, we're children. Children's tempers are fickle. Let's hide it from him for now. I don't know what the future will be like. Lillian seemed to think about it seriously and muttered, Oh. It seems like I haven't grown up yet, but that's not bad, don't mention that again. If I'm fine, you'll be fine too. At most, I'll give you a part of my divinity in the future. Although I don't really like a fool like you, but you're also quite important. And... Stupid Vivian. I'm the elder sister. Vivian did not seem to want to argue about this matter. Instead, she used a matter-of-fact tone and said weakly, Although I'm not as strong as you, I'm actually smarter than you. Bang! The furious Lillian kicked the door in anger and stormed into the room. She would not fall into her trap. Otherwise, that idiot Vivian would definitely test her with the spell model that made her dizzy. She was the witch of terror, Lillian. Why would she need to understand the spell model when casting spells? Couldn't she just raise her finger and say, Bayou, 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 bayou? What a simple matter. It seemed that the two young ladies had a series of discussions and confrontations on the question of, who's the idiot? Chapter 226. The Sea Temple. Soren was a little stunned when he walked to the door because he saw a special carriage. It was not that the carriage was special, but there was a tuna-like emblem on it. If he remembered correctly, according to the knowledge of this world, this should be the family emblem of a noble family. The emblem of a noble family was special and representative. Using this tuna-like emblem, the other party should be a noble family in the coastal area. This was Port Tylon. Port Tylon was a chaotic area. Although there were managers, they were definitely not nobles, and the forces behind the scenes were changing frequently. In other words, this noble could not be a local, it could only be a noble in the coastal area. But why would a noble in the coastal area come here? And to the sea temple, which was inclined to the evil camp. Did they believe in the sea goddess? Soren frowned and walked in. He saw a female figure praying. From the back, she was very tall and beautiful. She wore a veil on her head and had a slender waist. Because she was kneeling in front of the statue of the sea goddess, her buttocks were very large and round when she bent down. No matter from which angle, this woman was full of strong temptation. Soren's footsteps startled the other party. She stood up after hearing the sound, a pair of blue eyes staring at Soren, then she took off her veil with a smile. She had a very charming face, and her nose was a little high, which was a characteristic of the Western nobles. Her skin was very white, and her eyelashes were very long. It looked like she was wearing false eyelashes, but in fact, she was born this way. Another iconic feature was that she had a black mole at the corner of her mouth. It was a very small and inconspicuous black mole. Coupled with her charming face, it seemed to be a little more seductive. This woman was tall, about 5 centimeters taller than Soren. It was not easy for a woman with such a height to find a husband. After all, Soren's half-elf blood was not short. She was estimated to be more than 1.8 meters tall. This tall woman looked very slender. She should be in her 20s, no more than 24 years old. Because of the long skirts that were popular among the nobles nearby, her chest was exposed. Her full breasts, slender waist, and round buttocks were outlined by the snow-white long skirt, which was very tempting. This kind of dress seemed to be commonly worn at aristocratic banquets because it could perfectly show a woman's curves and seduction. It was not comfortable to wear this kind of dress normally. The main reason was that the girdle was too high and affected one's breathing. People who were not used to wearing it would feel suffocated. Soren was slightly stunned. He couldn't help but take a few more glances at her. It wasn't just because of her charming appearance, but more importantly, her appearance felt a little familiar. Soren had never seen this woman before, but after a few more glances, he finally understood why she looked so familiar. It was because the woman in front of him was a little similar to Adele Isabella in some of her features. The two had about 50% similarity in facial contours. Facing Soren's gaze, the noblewoman's face was slightly red. Then she gently bowed and lifted the corner of her skirt with her white hands. When she bent her knees slightly, the fullness of her chest was even more amazing. It was as if she deliberately revealed a deep ravine in front of Soren. The long skirt with a little lace was like a blooming flower. The noblewoman in front of him gently bowed and looked up with a bright smile. It seemed that her cheeks were slightly red because of Soren's handsome face. Then she turned around and walked into the back of the temple. Her name is Monica Isabella. The figure of the Naga siren priest came out. She seemed to be very satisfied with Soren's performance at the beginning. She smiled strangely and said, "She is the daughter of Earl Cullard and his only heir. She is the descendant of Queen Isabella. She has the purest noble blood. Many talented sorcerers have been born in this bloodline. Although she is just an ordinary person, she has a very rich dowry. Because her father has gradually grown old, she is in charge of the power and wealth of the entire Earl's territory. She even has a group of knights loyal to her. In the entire South Coast, she is the dream wife of countless nobles. It's because of her beauty, and also because of her wealth." "That's right." The Naga siren priest looked at Soren's increasingly shocked expression. Her eyes seemed to be inexplicable. She said playfully, "She is also a chaste virgin." "What the hell? What is going on?" Even with Soren's calm state of mind, he was a little scared at this moment. After a while, Soren recovered a little. Then he took a deep breath and said, "Is this the reason why the priest asked me to come here?" It seemed that he really underestimated the influence of the Sea Temple. If the noble woman just now really had the right to inherit the Earl's territory, then she would definitely be a first-class noble family on the South Coast. Even if their population was declining, they still had some heritage accumulated over hundreds of years. However, the Naga siren priest in front of her was completely treating her as a trading commodity. It seemed that as long as Soren was willing, she could marry Soren. Women in this world also had the right to inherit the title. The dowry property would not be counted as the husband's family. It was a private property owned by individuals. Therefore, the status of noble women was not low. Many noble family standards for marriage were based on bloodline, dowry, status, and so on. Beauty was only a small part of it. From this point of view, the noble woman just now was really the top standard. The Naga siren priest said that she was the target of many nobles on the South Coast, which was not an exaggeration at all. However, how could the Sea Temple control such a noble woman? Although it only affected her marriage, it also represented a strong influence. The Sea Temple's control of the coastal areas was stronger than Soren imagined. The noble woman just now must have had some kind of deal with the Sea Temple, or some kind of contract. Soren didn't know what kind of agreement was reached, but he was sure that the Naga siren priest really wanted to recruit him this time. The Naga siren priest frowned slightly. Soren's words obviously meant that the trump card she had just used did not completely move him. This made her feel a little annoyed in her heart. She faintly felt that Soren really didn't know what was good for him. However, she still restrained herself from showing it because she had just given Soren a sweet date, and there was still a mace prepared for him. She smiled strangely and said slowly, "I really didn't expect you to have such an ability. In just a few days, you have quelled the pirates in the nearby sea." However, The Naga siren priest paused here and said in a deep voice, "You seem to have become the target of the Swamp King. He seems to intend to kill you to consolidate his position. This is a very powerful pirate king. His men are completely different from the humans you have encountered. There are even many non-human monsters among them. If you can't defeat him, I'm afraid all your efforts will soon be in vain. Those pirates don't have much loyalty. As long as you fail once, they will betray you without hesitation. So I want to know how you plan to deal with the Swamp King." The Naga siren priest showed a smile as if she was gloating. If Vivian hadn't woken up, Soren would have had to ask the Sea Temple for help. However, now that he and Vivian joined forces, it was not impossible to defeat the Swamp King, one of the pirate kings. After all, Soren was very clear about the power of the Sons of Fear. They were born in the quasi-legendary realm. Vivian was now integrated with the power of the other two Sons of Fear. Her strength was definitely stronger than Soren, but she did not have enough experience to use this power. Reject the Naga siren priest? In the future, when he needed the power of the Sea Temple, Soren could not make their relationship too stiff. Agree to her invitation? If it was not a compulsory divine contract, he could agree. Anyway, Soren did not have any faith at present. It was not impossible to hang the title of a panfaith. After all, the sea goddess was a golden thigh that he could hug. In the end, he had a thought in his mind. That was to eat the candy and throw the cannonball back. Chapter 227. Sea Temple. Shortly after Soren left, the figure of the noblewoman also appeared. She looked up at the Naga siren priest, who did not look very good in front of her, and said, "Is that him?" The Naga siren priest's face was still a little ugly because she found that Soren was like a slippery loach. No matter how she tried to rope him in, it seemed that she was still lacking a little bit. Sometimes she even felt like she was punching the air, and her internal organs were faintly uncomfortable. She glanced at the charming noblewoman in front of her and said slowly, "Not necessarily. This human is too cunning. Unless he completely joins us, you are just bait in front of him. We have spent too many resources on you. Without our help, your father's territory would have been swallowed up by others. Also, pay attention to your virginity. I've noticed that this is a huge temptation for human males. Before we decide on someone who's really valuable to us, you can't get too close to any male creature. Your current task is still to continue to expand your influence. If necessary, provoke a war between the nobles on the south coast. Only war can break the inherent power blockade and let us penetrate into the human race." The noblewoman's face was a little stiff, and there was a hint of anger in her eyes, but she still nodded and said, "Yes." No matter what woman, there would be a trace of dissatisfaction in her heart when she was used as a bargaining chip. However, it seemed that her awe of the Sea Temple was very obvious, and the Sea Temple should have controlled her a lot, so she had to bow her head under such obviously humiliating words. No one knew what agreement Soren and the Naga siren priest finally reached, but looking at the Naga siren priest's face now, she didn't seem to have the upper hand. This made her look up to Soren. To be able to play tricks with the Sea Temple also required confidence and strength. Soren left the Sea Temple. His complexion wasn't very good either. From the moment he left the temple, his expression was ashen. He turned around and came to the port, then waved his hand to summon a pirate, and said in a deep voice, "Tell Adele to come and see me. Very soon." A red-haired female pirate in tight leather armor appeared in front of Soren. She carefully glanced at Soren's face and then said, "Your Excellency. What are your orders?" Soren glanced at her and said expressionlessly, "From today onwards, 50% of the profits of the Port Tylon route will be handed over to the Sea Temple. You will personally control the smuggling trade of the Shipwreck Bay route. You must ensure that no one else can touch this route. From now on, no matter if it's an official or private slave trade, as long as it's on the sea, we must capture it. Anyone who wants to make money from the slave trade has to get our permission." Slave trade. This was the main source of trade for the south coast, because there were many mines near the coast, which required a lot of labor to mine. It was basically impossible to hire civilians. Everyone knew that the mine was a place of no return, so they could only find labor from criminals and slaves. In addition, the nobles in this area had many manners and economic systems, so slaves were the cheapest labor force from any perspective. Slaves, this was a common problem. Even the gods could not change the status quo. Even the slavery system was supported and affirmed by many gods. Even in Soren's memory of his previous life, the abolition of the slavery system was delayed until modern history. In this world, it was even more deeply rooted and lasted for countless years, almost to the point where it was deeply rooted in people's hearts. Most ordinary people would desire to have a manor land, and then buy and own some slaves. From then on, the slaves would be responsible for farming, and they would live a leisurely life without worrying about food and clothing. If it weren't for many kind people and some churches who hated the slavery system, it would have become rampant in the South. Yes, sir. Adele, who had long red hair, nodded and replied, "I'll arrange the manpower now." Soren glanced at her silently, then said, "Do you know a woman named Monica? She also has the surname Isabella like you, and is the only daughter of an earl." The red-haired female pirate was puzzled for a moment, then thought for a moment and said, "Sir. The surname Isabella is distributed in the South and the West. She may be related to my mother, but because of my background, I'm unfamiliar with these people. My mother seems to have a cousin on the South Coast, who seems to have the title of Earl, but his family has long since declined. If she is the only daughter of the Earl, he should be my mother's cousin. There are only so many people with the surname Isabella near the South Coast." A declining aristocrat? It was indeed a good investment target, and also easy to control. Soren nodded gently and said, "Go. Your focus is on the slave trade, and you must ensure that this line is in our hands." Adele nodded slightly, hesitated for a moment, and said, "Sir. You value the slave trade so much, are you going to use slaves to expand overseas?" "I'm not questioning your decision, I'm just curious and guessing." In the end, there was a hint of awe on her face. Soren's expression was a little surprised, but he didn't want to answer. He just said in a deep voice, "Do your own thing. You'll know when the time comes." Slaves were the cheapest labor force, and also the easiest group of people to satisfy. They had been forced to despair by life. As long as they were given a little hope, a little right to live, a little desire for freedom, they would become a very useful card. Soren not only needed their labor force, but also needed them as a foundation. It was very difficult to transfer people from overseas. The mainland was not completely chaotic yet, and it was too risky to attract explorers and adventurers. Slaves were a key part of Soren's plan. Soren walked in the direction of his residence. Adele Isabella stayed where she was, looking in the direction Soren left in a daze. The more she knew, the more she felt that this sir had a big plan, because he easily gave up a large part of the benefits of being a pirate. A person who could give up so many benefits must be for something more valuable. What did this man want? She was actually a little excited, and she couldn't wait to know his plan. Unfortunately, she could only hide it deep in her mind. Soren returned to his residence. As soon as he entered the room, he saw a petite figure pouncing on him, and then directly hanging on his body. Vivian hugged his neck and twisted it, and said in a crisp voice, "Big brother is finally back. I'm bored to death alone." Soren smiled, picked her up, and then put her on the bed. Then he sat down, and said with a serious expression, "Vivian? How have you been? Do you feel any discomfort? Why did you call yourself Lillian the Witch of Fear last time?" The little girl's body stiffened, and then her eyes flickered, and then she whispered, I'm okay. But I remember a lot of things. Among them is the knowledge of Lillian. After that, I learned a lot of spells and became much more powerful than before." "Oh. Big brother, will you not like Vivian because of this?" Speaking of this, the little girl's expression suddenly became a little pitiful. Soren looked at her with a little heartache. He leaned over and kissed her forehead, and then said, "Silly girl. I will always be by your side. Was it really like this? Soren's heart skipped a beat, and he secretly guessed, if I didn't come, and Soren died like this, Vivian would become Lillian? I hope I won't leave any hidden dangers for her. No. I have to find a way to kill the other Sons of Fear, and then completely wipe out the Fear Lord's consciousness. Otherwise, as long as his consciousness still exists, it will be an invisible hidden danger. I may be affected when I fight against the Fear Lord's consciousness, and Vivian can even fight against the Fear Lord's consciousness. Soren seemed to be thinking about something. The little girl's expression was a little unnatural, but she still sat next to him obediently. Come here for a while. Soren seemed to have thought of something, and said in a deep voice, Vivian. Big Brother has a way to help you check your body. It may be a little uncomfortable, are you willing to give it a try? The little girl's face was a little confused, but she still nodded very obediently. Soren showed a little smile. Then, there was a light in his eyes. This gaze seemed to make Vivian feel a little uncomfortable, as if her whole body was exposed in front of her brother's eyes. She faintly felt a little repulsed and a little shy. A row of data appeared. Do you want to perform a data scan on the target? Attention! The target is very powerful and dangerous. There may be hostility. Data scan requires 16,000 slaughter EXP. Do you want to scan? It actually requires so much slaughter EXP? Although Soren felt a little pain in his heart, after looking at the nearly 70,000 slaughter EXP he had accumulated, he still silently chose to confirm. He needed to know to what extent Vivian had been strengthened, and also needed to know if Vivian was affected by the Fear Lord's consciousness. The slaughter EXP could be earned later, and Vivian's safety was more important in Soren's eyes. Chapter 228. A series of data appeared. Soren's eyes were filled with zeros and ones. The data simulation didn't cost much for him, but it would cost a lot of slaughter EXP to calculate other people's data. He once did a rough calculation for Vivian, but at that time, Vivian had just awakened her sorcerer abilities, so the amount of slaughter EXP needed was nothing compared to now. Now, Vivian should be a legendary level spellcaster, so Soren didn't know how much data he could calculate. The jumping numbers made Soren feel a little dizzy, and Vivian also seemed to be very uncomfortable. She was like a little kitten with her hair standing on end. She reached out her little hand and grabbed the corner of his shirt, but didn't do anything else. The little girl seemed to be repulsed by this strange energy scan. If the person in front of her wasn't her brother, she would have attacked him directly. Vivian, Witch of Fear, Child of Fear, Race, Human, Attributes, Strength 9, +1, Dexterity 12, +1, Constitution 16, +1, Intelligence 21, +1, Wisdom 21, +1, Charm 27, +1. Alignment, Chaotic Neutral, Class, Warlock LV 10, Warlock LV 8, Wizard LV 7, Grade 5, HP. Ability, Unknown Divinity, None Divinity, None Divinity, Minor Divinity, All Attributes +1, Domain, Fear Others. Basic Skills. Legendary level abilities, legendary level spell penetration, legendary level spell control, legendary level spell construct, level 0 spell instant cast, level 1 spell instant cast, level 2 spell instant cast, level 3 spell instant cast. Other abilities, spell control, spell penetration, spell empower, combat spell casting, silent spell casting, spell instant cast, flying spell casting. Gifted abilities, Spellcasting Genius, Divine Power Conversion, Child of Fear. Other abilities? Soren was stunned. When he saw Vivian's attributes after the simulation, he was stunned. Now, he finally understood why it took so much slaughter EXP to digitize Vivian's ability. It was because the little girl in front of him was almost invincible. Soren couldn't help but feel deeply shocked when he saw the large row of legendary abilities. No wonder Vivian didn't need to chant many spells in the past, and her casting speed was so fast that it was frightening. It turned out that she actually had so many legendary level instant cast abilities. And it seemed to be born with minor divinity. When Soren found out that Vivian was still a human, he let out a sigh of relief. It seemed that the Dread Lord didn't have much of an effect on her. At the very least, he didn't change Vivian's race. However, Soren couldn't help but marvel at the innate abilities and specialties of the demon god's offspring. Soren spent a lot of effort to master one or two spellcasting abilities, but Vivian already had a large number of legendary-level spellcasting abilities. As long as she could exert her strength, it wouldn't be difficult for her to fight against a legendary-level wizard. Divine Sorcerer? Did Vivian automatically become a divine sorcerer because she awakened the bloodline of the Child of Fear? Soren couldn't help but fall into deep thought. The divine sorcerer was a special sorcerer's advancement. It must be blessed by the power of the gods. Vivian, as the Child of Fear, naturally had no difficulty in advancing. However, her advancement into a divine sorcerer was equivalent to cutting off the possibility of advancing into a dragon disciple. In the future, the only way to advance was to become a destiny sorcerer like Princess Royal, but this advancement was very dependent on luck. Since Vivian was so powerful, it would be easier for them to defeat the Swamp King. Then it would be much easier for them to deal with the Swamp King. They might even be able to bypass the power of the Sea Temple. Brother? The little girl raised her head and looked at Soren, who was in a daze. She raised her little hand and shook his arm, and whispered, "What's wrong? What did you see?" Soren woke up and couldn't help but smile. "Nothing. I said that my Vivian would definitely be the top sorcerer in the future. I just didn't expect you to be more exaggerated than I expected. You actually entered the legendary level in such a short time." Vivian still looked a little confused. However, she couldn't help but laugh and said, "Although I don't understand what brother is saying, it seems like you're praising me." Of course, Vivian is very powerful. Soren raised his hand and stroked the little girl's head, and then said seriously, "Vivian, I have to tell you the next thing seriously. As the Child of Fear, your future path is destined to be difficult, so we have to plan in advance. You have been smarter than other children since you were a child, so from today onwards, I will try to tell you a lot of things. But it doesn't matter if you don't understand, just remember them first. Brother will always be by your side." The little girl nodded and said, "Okay. I will remember it." "Very good." Soren smiled and said in a deep voice, "The first step now is to give you the strength to fight against the vampire god. He has mastered the vampire god's divine title and has become the incarnation of the Holy One. Now we are no match for him at all. But this is only a temporary thing. As long as you give us some time, brother can help you become a more powerful deity than him. The Dread Lord is our ultimate enemy. But now we have to solve another small problem." Soren said little by little. The little girl lay on his knee and listened carefully. Occasionally, she would ask questions. As Soren spoke more and more, her expression became more and more confused. Although she had the ability of the Child of Fear, she was only a little girl who was about to reach the age of 9. Her innate intelligence could not replace experience. There were many things that she did not understand, but she tried very hard to remember because her intuition told her that her brother's method was much better than what she thought was effective. From the moment she accepted her identity as the Child of Fear, the little girl had realized that her path would be very difficult. Their ultimate enemy was the Dread Lord. A terrible existence that had existed for a long time, had great divine power, and occupied a part of the bottomless abyss. The Child of Fear was just a chess piece that he had arranged. Now, whether it was the vampire god, Vivian, or Soren, they were all on the chessboard that he had arranged. Even if they had tried to change their fate, the most powerful part of the power was still in the hands of the Dread Lord. So far, only the Church of the Dread Lord in the material plane had taken action. As the Dread Lord with great divine power in the bottomless abyss, he still had a large number of believers in the abyss. Because the time of troubles had not officially started yet. There were only a few demons in the abyss who could enter the material plane. But once the Avatar crisis started, the balance between the planes would gradually be broken. A large number of plane gaps and the inability of the gods to interfere with the balance would strengthen the connections between the various planes. At that time, not only the bottomless abyss and the Bator Inferno, but even the connection between the four elemental planes and the material plane would become very close. In Soren's memory, there were even events where astral world creatures appeared in the material plane. At that time. That was the time when the power that the Dread Lord had accumulated for thousands of years in the abyss would explode. The throne of fear was not just a simple space. It also represented a kingdom created by a great divine power, as well as the believers and forces that he had developed over a long period of time. The material plane was just an extension of the Church of Fear. In history, many gods tenaciously held on for a period of time after the destruction of the Church in the material plane. This was the foundation that they had accumulated over a long period of time. The material plane was the foundation of everything. Most of the petitioners of the kingdom of the gods in the heavenly realm came from the material plane. The kingdom controlled by the Abyss Lord was also based on the souls of the believers in the material plane. Soren saw further than others. Chapter 229. The cold sea breeze blew in their faces. It was now the coldest period of the year, and the temperature would gradually warm up after February next year. Soren brought Vivian to the pirate ship. He didn't know if it was his illusion, but he felt that Vivian was a little quieter today than yesterday. The little girl obediently held his finger with her small hand, and from time to time, she would raise her little head and look at him with a sweet smile. This reminded Soren of the time in Amber City. At that time, Vivian liked to hold his finger like this. There were already many fierce-looking pirates gathered on the pirate ship, and they couldn't help but be surprised by the sudden appearance of the little girl. However, no one dared to ask anything. The lord in front of them scared them out of their wits. Throughout the shipwreck bay, the reputation of the throat cutter was spreading far and wide. Perhaps it was because she had experienced a lot along the way. The little girl was now very calm when she looked at these fierce pirates. Occasionally, she would curiously look at the tattoos on their bodies. Pirates preferred tattoos because sometimes they might not even be able to distinguish the body after death, so tattoos became a symbol of identity. The warship soon left Port Tylon, and Soren did not specify the destination. He just asked them to move in the direction of the deep sea. This undoubtedly made people feel puzzled, but everyone obeyed obediently. Brother. Vivian stood on the deck and looked at the sea. The sea breeze blew her beautiful long hair. She smiled sweetly at Soren and said, "Can I fish?" Soren's expression was very calm. He smiled and said casually, "Yes. But it's easy to encounter sharks when fishing in this area." "Okay." The little girl's eyes lit up. She clapped her hands and said, "I want to catch a great white shark." Soren was stunned. Then he ordered the others to bring iron hooks. Naturally, they could not use ordinary methods to deal with sharks. They had to use the smell of blood to lure them over. Fishing rods could not be dropped at all. They had to use other fishing tools, which this pirate ship did not have. But for Soren, getting a shark was a piece of cake. He hung a piece of meat on the hook and whispered, "Why is Vivian wearing a white dress today?" The little girl looked at Soren with great interest. Then, she smiled sweetly and twirled around like a cute little princess. Vivian's two favorite dresses. One is white, and the other is black. "Do they look good on you, brother?" "Yes." Soren nodded with a smile. The little girl blinked her eyes and smiled. Her expression seemed a little strange, and then she looked at the sea as if nothing had happened. The pirate ship continued to sail. When they passed by a sea area, he ordered them to stop for a while and then looked at the bottom of the sea. Then, they continued to sail and approached the more dangerous areas in the deep sea. The other pirates were obviously a little worried. They seemed to be afraid of encountering sea monsters, but they did not dare to disobey Soren's order. They just showed a little worried look on their faces. There were many sea monsters on the deep sea route. At the same time, there were also other sea races. This was why the fleet had to pray for the blessings of the gods before sailing. Otherwise, they could only use powerful sea monsters as a sacrifice. Northern Tower. A woman with a beautiful face came to one of the many towers erected in the north. This was a very old wizard tower. It had existed for a long time, longer than many cities in the north. It was also the only wizard tower that was well preserved since the Arcane Empire. The whole wizard tower was covered by a special energy field. Ordinary people would not want to get close to it at all. They could not even see it with their naked eyes. The beautiful woman knelt in front of the tower and humbly lowered her head. Then, a faint sigh was heard. Then, the door of the tower slowly opened. The beautiful woman's face showed a hint of surprise, and then she quickly walked into the tower. At the top of the tower, an old woman was sitting on the astrology platform. Her hair was snow-white, and the most eye-catching thing about her was her pupils. They were almost completely white, and it was impossible to distinguish between the white of her eyes and the outline of her pupils. She raised her head and looked at the beautiful woman who came out from behind the door. She could not help but sigh softly and said slowly, "Corinne, haven't you given up yet?" The beautiful woman humbly lowered her head and said, "Your Excellency, Eye of the North. I really don't want to." The old witch shook her head gently and sighed, "With your talent, if you were not obsessed with power outside of yourself, I'm afraid you would have already entered the realm of legends. I banished you to Whiterun in the hope that you would wake up soon and take over my position one day. But I didn't expect you to not give up after so many years. Your daughter is about to surpass you, but you are still in the same place. You really disappoint me." The beautiful woman's face showed a trace of unwillingness and murmured, "I really don't want to. I don't want to give up. You said that as long as I could study this knowledge, I could master the power of the Arcane Empire. In order to study its mystery, I have already lost my daughter. Sacrificed my most beautiful years. I am about to lose everything. How can I give up on it?" The Eye of the North sighed and said slowly, "Even if you study it, what can you do? How powerful was the Arcane Empire in the past? If those great arcanists were not obsessed with power and knowledge, how could it lead to the destruction of the huge Arcane Empire? They had destroyed themselves, and in their madness, they had attempted to encroach upon those forbidden domains. You have lost your way in power. I only see destruction and destruction in you. Even if you study it in the end, it will only bring you destruction." The beautiful woman bit her lips and said with a pale face, "Is this the fate that you saw? Is that why you no longer support my research? You even banished me to Whiterun?" The Eye of the North did not speak, but there was a trace of pity in her eyes. "Why?" Drops of tears fell, and the beautiful woman in front of her actually cried. This was an extremely rare situation. She stood up angrily and said in a sharp voice, "Why? Since you have already divined my fate, why are you only telling me now?" The Eye of the North did not answer, but lowered her head in loneliness. The beautiful woman looked at her coldly, then turned and walked out of the wizard tower. She said in a cold voice, "You also desire that power, don't you? You know that I can't succeed, but you still want to solve this mystery from me. I won't give up. If fate wants me to be destroyed, then let me welcome it." The seductive woman opened her mouth and chanted a forbidden language. Then, her skin began to change. It turned from white to dark green, and then back to a strange pale color. The Eye of the North's face showed a trace of shock, and then murmured, "You actually already." The beautiful woman looked at her coldly and slowly said, "Yes. Since I am already regarded as evil and destined to fall into the abyss of hell after death, then what does it matter if I become like this a step earlier?" She turned and prepared to leave. But at this time, the Eye of the North suddenly opened her mouth and told a story. Legend has it that before the birth of the twins of destiny, everyone's fate was controlled by the goddess of luck. When every life was born, she would toss the coin of fate that represented their future luck. Some people were heads, while others were tails. But there was a very special kind of person. When the goddess of luck threw up the coin of destiny, the coin would stand up. Even the gods could not control the fate of this kind of person. In terms of fate, they were more free than the gods. Fate is changing all the time. The Eye of the North only saw a corner of it. If you really don't want to give up, then go and find this kind of person. If you can get his help, your fate will also change. As for success or failure in the end, no one knows. The beautiful woman's eyes eased a little. She bowed slightly and then left. Chapter 230. There were stars in the night sky. For some reason, the stars in the sky began to dim recently, which made many people feel worried. Because the stars in this world represented the gods, and the kingdoms of the gods were connected to the astral world, and then the light of the stars was reflected back to the material plane. The whole multiverse could be connected by the astral world. If one or two stars were dim, it might be a battle between the gods, but now all the stars had become dim, which made people feel a little panic. But now, those who could notice this were special existences, and ordinary people still lived their original lives. Your Excellency. The first mate of the pirate ship came over. His expression was a little nervous, and whispered, "We have entered the deep sea area. This is the territory of the Swamp King. I am worried that he will attack us because we entered his sea area." Soren looked at him coldly, then said, "Continue sailing." The first mate was obviously startled by his gaze, and then immediately ordered the others to continue sailing, while silently praying that they would not encounter the pirate ship of the Swamp King. This was a pirate king that had existed for a long time. With their strength, it was impossible for them to be the opponent of the Swamp King, not to mention that it was rumored that its subordinates were a group of monsters. "There's a ship!" The lookout in the night suddenly exclaimed, and then shouted, "There's a ship nearby. It's a pirate ship. 3 ships. No. It's 5 ships. Ah. It's the Swamp King. It's surrounding us." The deck was in a panic. Soren narrowed his eyes at this moment, glanced at Vivian next to him, and whispered, "It finally appeared." The purpose of his trip was to lure the Swamp King out. Passively taking a beating was not Soren's habit, not to mention that he now had several cards in his hand. If he killed the Swamp King, he would completely open the route to the outer islands, and at the same time, he would be qualified to become the new pirate king. Although the south coast was only a corner of the world, this corner was tantamount to stepping on a step, and officially having the qualifications to compete with the major forces of the gods. "Prepare for battle." Soren let out a low roar. His voice startled the other pirates, and they began to move in a panic. It seemed like the prestige he had accumulated over the past period of time was working well. He was able to keep them from breaking down. The legend of the Pirate King spread throughout the south coast. They were not ordinary people. If they were not monsters, they were hybrid creatures, or legendary professions. Ordinary pirates did not even have the courage to fight with them. "Vivian." Soren glanced at the slightly nervous little girl beside him. He wasn't sure if it was just his imagination, but after a few seconds, the little girl's expression returned to normal. There was even an excited smile on her face, as if she couldn't wait for the enemy to appear. Her petite body floated into the air as she chuckled, "Don't worry, big brother. Leave this trash to me." Boom. 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 Continuous sounds of cannons sounded. The sea around the pirate ship was shot up with waves several feet high. Only one of the cannonballs hit the hull, but it only grazed the deck. The pirates were still very chaotic. These guys were not good at commanding. The lookout had already climbed down, and someone nearby shouted in horror, "In the sea! There are monsters in the sea!" Soren's pupils shrank slightly. He glanced at the surrounding sea and suddenly issued an order. Immediately. Then, he saw a dense fog appear in the surrounding sea. Not far from Soren, on a huge dragon-headed warship, the Swamp King had a cruel smile on his face. He was a hybrid giant monster. He was half swamp giant and half lizard, so he looked like a giant lizard monster. While maintaining his human form, he also had a lot of scales on his body. It was surrounded by a group of strange-looking lizard men, as well as an unrecognizable sea creature. The deep-sea demon, Dagon, liked to taint the bloodline to cultivate believers, so many of his subordinates were strange creatures. However, these creatures were very dangerous. Just a bunch of useless trash. The Swamp King picked up the heavy anchor. This was the weapon he used. His body was so strong because of the power of the demon lord, and he also had a part of the demon bloodline. The strength of the giant subspecies, the agility and defense bonus of the lizard people, and the skin and resistance bonus brought by the demon bloodline. Even if he didn't wear any armor, he still had the same defense as the scales. The weapon it used was an incomparably heavy anchor. This weapon had a crushing effect against any warrior. The entire south coast. Even the top royal Naga guards in the Naga clan didn't dare to take a direct attack in front of him. He was a fallen warrior. However, he didn't have the ability to cast spells. He had special combat skills, and at the same time, he could use some of the demon's spell-like abilities. This was a very dangerous enemy. The only weakness was that he was crazy. He inherited the chaos and evil of the demons. Killing would make him even crazier. Even his subordinates always kept a distance from him. Because when the terrible weapon was wielded, it had also killed a lot of his subordinates. Lizard people, go to the sea. The Swamp King was not a reckless man without tactics. He looked at the strange fog and said in a deep voice, "Release the Devil Ray and the Deep Sea Lurker." These were the offspring of the Deep Sea Demon Lord, Dagon. Of course, they were not the kind with divinity. They were just a kind of mutated sea demon monster. The Swamp King could control some of these monsters and make them listen to his orders. Accompanied by the sound of jumping into the sea, the lizard people sneered and dived into the sea. They were amphibians and had adapted to the environment of the sea. These lizard people, who were stronger than the inland, were the important subordinates of the Swamp King. Among them, there were also his own offspring. Although in order to reproduce these offspring, he had changed many lizard people's spouses. Co-fishmen. The Swamp King glanced at the other battlefield and said in a deep voice, "Why don't these trash attack? Aren't they afraid that I will eat them after killing those clowns?" This pirate king liked to eat living things, including intelligent creatures. Ah! 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 There was a scream, but it was not from the pirate ship on the opposite side. It was from the lizard people that he had just sent. One of the lizard people trembled and climbed up from the sea. He climbed along the hull to the deck and said, "Below. There's something below." Monster. What kind of monster is there? A monster that could scare them like this naturally wouldn't be that simple. On the other side, Soren's ship was also a group of frightened pirates. From time to time, someone shouted, "Lizard people." It's the lizard people. Ah! Co-fishmen. Be careful. They're close. This. What is this? There was a sound of teeth chattering. Suddenly, the sea next to the pirate ship separated from both sides, and then a dark mast rushed out from the bottom of the sea. In an instant, a warship full of death aura appeared on the right side of Soren, covering some of the attacks on the side. Some creatures that were even uglier and weirder than the lizard men appeared. Their bodies were covered with algae and death aura. They attacked the pirate ships in all directions. At the same time, they sank a warship in the midst of the muffled sound of cannons. Ghost. Ghost ship. The pirates on the deck were stunned for a moment. When they found that the ghost ship was attacking the enemy, they all looked at Soren. Soren nodded slightly, then picked up Vivian and landed on the ghost ship opposite. There was a burst of cheers. The chief mate's face was flushed red, and his eyes were full of uncontrollable excitement. He roared at the other pirates, "Get ready to fight. Get ready to fight back. You bunch of trash. Destroy them. From today onwards, we are the most powerful pirates in this sea area. Your Excellency will be the new pirate king." Chapter 231. Pirate King. What an inspiring title. If Soren defeated the Swamp King, then he would be the new Pirate King. In the future, this sea area would be his territory. Many of them would be promoted, and in the future, some of them would even be able to lead a pirate ship alone. They were not a group of people who were afraid of death. On the contrary, pirates were a very fierce group of people, but they would not fight a battle without hope of victory. Now they had a ghost ship as a helper. They had been on the sea for a long time and knew very well how powerful the legendary ghost ship was. This battle was hard to determine. But as long as they won, they would be the most powerful pirates in this sea area. Wealth, status, power. In the future, some of them might reach the level of sea wolf, narwhal, killer whale, and become a pirate leader. As long as they still obeyed the orders of the Pirate King Soren. Bursts of gunfire sounded. The appearance of the ghost ship made these pirates brave. Although their combat power was not as good as the enemy, they also began to launch counterattacks to kill the monsters close to them. On the other side, Soren had begun to control the ghost ship. This ship was part of his deal with the Naga Siren priest. There were many enemies on all sides. As a pirate king who had been dominating for a long time, the Swamp King naturally had more than a few men. The number of enemies was still several times that of Soren, and it did not include the monsters hidden in the sea. This was not an easy battle because the battle between them had just begun. Soren stopped Vivian, who wanted to kill, and said in a deep voice, "Save your spell slots. Spellcasters must not use up their spells in battle. You must only make a move at the critical moment." Vivian had a lot of spells. But this battle did not require her to fight alone, and Soren was not at ease to let her face too dangerous a battle. After all, her spell slots were not enough to completely crush so many enemies. Animated cable. Boomerang. Soren ordered the undead under his command to fire continuously. At the same time, he controlled the specter ship's ropes and tied up all the fishmen that approached. Then, he pulled out his scimitar and killed them one by one. The most powerful feature of the specter ship was these animated ropes. They flew out like poisonous snakes and dragged the enemies in their attack range directly. The specter ship had a very strong harvesting ability. With Soren's help, Slaughter EXP would skyrocket. He had accumulated a lot of Slaughter EXP. If it wasn't for the fact that he needed to achieve a breakthrough in his specialty, he would have already leveled up his profession. But for now, he had to wait. Soren's combat abilities were on the verge of a breakthrough, so he had to be patient in order to achieve the best results. What is that? Not far away, a pirate's shout could be heard. Then, a trace of movement could be seen in the distant sea. Then, the silhouettes of sharks rapidly approached. Incomparably strong shark men appeared nearby. They rode on huge tiger sharks and roared. Then, many shark men dove into the sea and joined the battle against the Swamp King. Finally, there are reinforcements. Soren's frowned brows relaxed a little. He then looked into the distance and murmured, "Where are the Nagas? The shark men can't deal with these pirates." There were some monsters with tentacles in the sea. They looked a bit like mutated octopuses. These large monsters fought with the sharks in the sea. Suddenly, blood spread on the sea surface. More and more enemies joined the battle. Many non-racial creatures controlled by the Swamp King began to approach. At the same time, human voices came from afar. The Swamp King had a lot of followers. These people were notorious criminals or people that other pirates could not tolerate. Their combat power was stronger than ordinary pirates, but they were also more cruel and dangerous. Damn it. Soren looked around and frowned. Why didn't the Naga reinforcements appear? Where is the other force promised by the Naga Siren priest? Where is the Pirate King trained by the Naga Siren? Won't he also join the battle? Soren's eyes were full of anger. It was not that he did not have the confidence to defeat the Swamp King, but the feeling of being played and betrayed made him feel indignant. Vivian's eyes seemed to have a suppressed desire to fight. She stuck out her little tongue and licked the corner of her mouth. She said with a strange voice, "Brother. There's a big monster over there. Let's go and kill it." At this moment, Soren was angry because the Naga reinforcements did not come. He did not notice the little girl's strangeness. In fact, the eyes of the 9-year-old girl in front of him were already filled with a faint blood-red light. Her expression was quite strange, as if the current scene made her excited and happy. She took a deep breath, as if she was very satisfied with the smell of blood. Then, her little body flew up. "Lillian. Don't be impulsive." Another voice sounded in the little girl's mind, anxiously saying, "You will be exposed. Wait a minute. You must learn to restrain yourself." The little girl landed back on the deck. She seemed to kick her shoes in dissatisfaction and muttered, "So annoying. I can't even go on a killing spree. I really want to kill all these trash." Sea Temple. A seawater mirror rose in front of the Naga siren priest, and the scene of the battle appeared in the mirror. The perspective was centered on the ghost ship. Her face was very pale, and she roared angrily, "Where is Ashrod? Why didn't he join the battle?" The angry roar caused the seawater in the temple to churn. The eyes of the Naga siren priest were filled with uncontrollable killing intent and anger because she knew that everything she had done at the beginning was in vain. She spent so much effort to win over Soren. But at this most critical moment, the pirate king, Ashrod, who was one of the most important reinforcements, did not join the battlefield. This was undoubtedly a betrayal to Soren. All the agreements and roping in at the beginning had become a joke. The Naga siren priest was sure that Soren was absolutely dissatisfied with her attitude because at this most critical moment, the reinforcements she promised were not there at all. She was angry. Very angry. The Naga siren priest was so angry that she roared, "Damn bastard. Ashrod. You are a dog raised by the royal family. How dare you disobey the orders of the temple? I must punish you. I will definitely kill you." It was too late. Even she did not expect that one of the 3 pirate kings, Ashrod, would betray her. Now she could only hope that Soren could defeat the Swamp King. Otherwise, not only would she lose a target, but the shark men under the control of the Sea Temple would also suffer heavy losses. And all of this was caused by that damned Ashrod. Her heart was full of killing intent. Not only for Ashrod, one of the 3 pirate kings, but also for the Naga siren royal family behind him. On another sea, a huge siren warship was sailing. Standing on the bow was a tall man with scales on the side of his face. He sneered and looked at the sea in the distance and whispered, "That idiot priest. Does she think I will obey orders so easily? Does she want to support another guy to replace me? Or does she want to completely control the power of the sea? How could he be willing to help a stranger deal with the Swamp King?" As long as the Swamp King was defeated, it meant that there would be a new pirate king on the south coast, which was a challenge to his power. Only that idiot priest would think that everything is under her control. Ashrod laughed, and a cold light appeared in his eyes. The sea goddess had not responded to the prayers of her believers for a long time. The silence of the gods was an opportunity for many people. On the siren warship, a Naga siren guard looked into the distance and said, "Ashrod. What are you going to do? How dare you disobey the orders of the priest? Aren't you afraid that she will punish you?" You're tuning in to the Dreamy Love Stories YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.